LoveLore Library. Chapter 963. In Mu Yang's tent, Yaoji was embroidering. A figure quickly entered the tent. Yaoji was shocked and looked up vigilantly. She was relieved when she saw the person. She asked worriedly, "Why are you here?" The person was Qin Feng. Qin Feng was wearing an ordinary Chu army uniform. His face was only slightly decorated. People who were familiar with him could recognize him. However, people who were not familiar with him could not see his real face at a glance. Qin Feng looked at Yaoji, who was on the soft couch. She had shed her gorgeous and glamorous clothes and was now wearing a simple green robe with a white fox fur cloak draped over her shoulders. Compared to her previous glamorous appearance, she now looked more delicate and gentle. Qin Feng's cold eyes were slightly warm. He smiled faintly, "Don't worry. There are no outsiders outside." Yaoji nodded. She also knew that the guards near this tent were the shadow guard of the Mahist army and the Qi Lin arranged by Qin Feng. Therefore, she did not have to worry about being discovered when she talked with Mu Lai. Knowing that Qin Feng would not suddenly appear in her tent for no reason, Yaoji put down the needlework in her hand. She stood up and asked, "What's the matter?" Qin Feng said, "General Liu and Wang Fei are about to arrive." However, General Liu's troops were blocked by the Chu army 200 miles away. Just now, Mo Jingli ordered Mu Yang to lead 100,000 troops to reinforce. They planned to wipe out General Liu's army in one fell swoop. Yaoji frowned slightly. "Where is Wang Fei?" Qin Feng said, "Wang Fei should have taken another route. I have to leave the camp to meet Wang Fei. You will take care of everything in the Chu army's camp." Yaoji nodded, "Don't worry." "That's right." Yaoji took out a hairpin from her hair and put it in Qin Feng's hand. "This is the Chu army's defensive map. I saw it from Mu Yang. Be careful." Qin Feng raised his eyebrows and twisted the hairpin gently. The hairpin split into two halves, revealing a tiny paper roll in the middle. Qin Feng took out the piece of paper and looked at it. He memorized the things drawn on it and casually threw the paper into the charcoal basin next to him. Then, he returned the hairpin to its original state and gently put it on Yaoji's hairpin. He said indifferently, "The golden hairpin is too eye-catching in the army, it's very easy to be discovered. But, you can give it to me later." Yaoji couldn't help blushing. Although she was over 30 years old, the snow-white fox cloak still set off her delicate face, making her look beautiful. Yaoji dodged to the side and forced herself to be calm. She said, "You should go now. Be careful." Qin Feng was not in a hurry. He just looked at Yaoji thoughtfully and asked, "Are you worried about me?" Yaoji was stunned and finally sighed. "After this matter is over, if we are both still alive, I will give you an answer." It was the first time that Qin Feng saw Yaoji so straightforward. Although there was no clear answer, it was also the first time that Yaoji gave a positive answer to her feelings. Unwilling to force her, Qin Feng whispered, "Don't worry. We will all be alive. I'll go first." After that, he turned around and left the tent. Yaoji looked at the empty tent and was lost in thought. She shouldn't be thinking about these problems at this time, but it was rare for her to be lost in thought. In fact, she had understood a long time ago that Mu Yang might be a beautiful dream in every woman's heart, but Qin Feng was more like the one who could give a woman safety and loyalty. With Qin Feng's status in the Prince Ding mansion and Princess Ding, he could have any beautiful woman he wanted. Why would he wait for her, a woman who was over 30 years old and had already given birth to a child? But compared to the former Mu Yang, Yaoji was more unwilling to ruin Qin Feng. "Yaoji." Mu Yang came in from outside and saw Yaoji standing in the middle of the tent. He couldn't help but be stunned and asked softly, "Yaoji, what's wrong?" Yaoji's eyes narrowed and a trace of determination flashed through her eyes. A faint smile appeared on her lips. She shook her head and said, "Nothing. I'm just imagining things." "What's the matter?" Mu Yang said apologetically, "I'm going to lead the army to battle. If there's anything, you can send someone to find father." Although the old Marquis Muyang was very unhappy that his son went to battle with a woman and a child, even the emperor and commander-in-chief Mo Jingli didn't say anything. Naturally, the old Marquis Muyang wouldn't say anything. Moreover, Mu Lai was his only grandson. Even if he was unhappy, he would still take care of him. Yaoji nodded and turned to walk inside. "Do you need me to pack anything for you?" Mu Yang pulled her and said, "No need. It's not very far. I'll be back in a few days. You just need to take good care of Lai, Yaoji. When this northern expedition is over, the Emperor will definitely reward you according to your merits. At that time, I will ask the Emperor to give you the rank and title of lady. In the future, I won't have to worry about you and Lai being wronged." Yaoji pushed Mu Yang's arms away slightly and said lightly, "As long as Lai is safe, it's fine. I don't need any rank or title." Mu Yang smiled faintly and thought that she declined because she was embarrassed. He didn't think much of it. "Even if you're only going for a few days, you should still bring some clothes. It's still very cold in the north." Yaoji turned to the side to pack. Seeing that she insisted, Mu Yang didn't refute and walked to the side with a smile to look at some documents. After a while, Mu Lai walked in and hurriedly bowed when he saw Mu Yang. "Father, are they not suitable to say that father is going to war?" Mu Lai asked curiously. Mu Yang picked him up and placed him on his lap. He smiled and said, "That's right. Father is leaving tonight. Lai must listen to mother obediently." Mu Lai nodded and said, "I understand." Mu Yang was very happy that his son, who didn't like being close to others, was sitting obediently on his lap. He simply carried Mu Lai away and began to look at the documents. However, he didn't notice that the 8-year-old child in his arms was reading 10 lines at a time. Every time Mu Yang turned a page, Mu Lai's eyes flashed slightly and he carefully memorized what he saw. Old Marquis. The guards outside the door greeted in unison. Mu Yang looked up and saw the old Marquis Muyang walking in from outside. He hurriedly stood up and said, "Father." The old Marquis Muyang naturally saw how Mu Yang carried Mu Lai and looked at the documents. He frowned slightly and said, "You're going to war in a while. How can you not be prepared?" Mu Yang smiled and said, "Yaoji is packing. Everything is ready. Father, don't worry." The old Marquis Muyang nodded and said, "That's good. Lu Jingxian is a famous general in the Mahist army. You must be careful." Mu Yang looked at his father in confusion. It wasn't his first time going to war. Moreover, his father had already said the same thing in the tent. "Father, is there a problem?" The old Marquis Muyang shook his head and said, "Nothing. I'm just a little worried about you." What the old Marquis Muyang didn't say was that he always had an ominous premonition ever since he went to war. But now that his son was about to go to war, he naturally couldn't say such ominous words. Chapter 964. Mu Yang understood and laughed loudly. "Now our army has the upper hand. Sun will lead the troops to intercept LV Jingxian. Even if we can't obtain a complete victory, there won't be any danger. Don't worry, father." Old Marquis Muyang didn't understand why he was so worried. He could only assume that he was old and worried more. He nodded. Yaoji came out with the packed luggage. She was startled when she saw old Marquis Muyang. She bowed slightly. "Old Marquis." Old Marquis Muyang nodded. Although he had some complaints about Yaoji's identity, Yaoji's behavior in the past few years had been more appropriate than Madame Sun, who was the legal wife, because she had Mu Lai as her son. Old Marquis Muyang couldn't give her any attitude. He only ordered, after Yang leaves, take good care of Lai, or in the tent. Don't wander around. Yaoji nodded obediently. Yaoji understands. Old Marquis, please don't worry. Mu Lai stood beside Mu Yang and said obediently, Grandfather, Lai will listen to mother's words. Old Marquis Muyang nodded in satisfaction and turned to leave. When he reached the entrance of the tent, he turned back to look at the desk Mu Yang was sitting on. Don't bring back official documents and battle reports in the future. After sending old Marquis Muyang off, Mu Yang said goodbye to Yaoji and Mu Lai before leaving with the luggage Yaoji prepared. Inside the tent, Mu Lai and Yaoji looked at each other for a while. Yaoji frowned. Did Marquis Muyang find out? Mu Lai's little face scrunched up. He thought for a while before saying, I don't think so. He probably thinks that it's not good for Muyang to put those things in the family's living quarters. No matter how smart old Marquis Muyang was, he wouldn't suspect a grandson who was only 8 or 9 years old. If old Marquis Muyang had discovered his identity, he wouldn't have just given him a few simple reminders. Yaoji nodded. Anyway, it's better to be careful. I know. Don't worry. Oh right. I just saw a few places where the Chu army is lying in ambush. I'll draw it and you can send it to General Lu later. Okay. When Mu Yang left the Chu army's camp that night, a secret letter was sent to Lu Jingxian. After Yili bid farewell to Lu Jingxian, she led the 200,000 soldiers and horses around the narrow shortcut, still taking the main road to the south. In just 2 or 3 days, they had reached a place not far from the Chu army. They set up camp and did not advance any further. This made Mo Jingli, who had been waiting there for a long time, a little disappointed. He naturally hoped that Yili would immediately lead her troops to fight the Chu army. This way, Mo Jingli would have at least an 80% chance of defeating the Mahist army. In the Mahist army's barracks, Qin Feng, who had just come out of the Chu army's barracks, also appeared here. After not seeing each other for many months, the people by Yili's side were still very familiar with Qin Feng. Yunting didn't hold back as he walked to the front and put his hand on Qin Feng's shoulder as he smiled. Commander Qin really comes and goes like a ghost. After not seeing each other for many months, you suddenly appeared on the battlefield again. Tell me, where have you been these past few months? Qin Feng had always been by Yili's side. Last time, Yili had come back from Jiangnan, Qin Feng had disappeared. The Mahist army was not completely uncurious. However, because Wang Fei might have sent him on an important mission, they couldn't ask. Now that Qin Feng had returned, Yunting naturally didn't hold back and wanted to know firsthand. Zhuo Jing and Lin Han naturally knew the truth, but they were also very curious. Naturally, they were curious about Qin Feng's personal matters. Yili had many subordinates, but the most special one was Qin Feng. Because he wasn't just the personal bodyguard that Prince Ding had personally sent to protect Wang Fei, he was also the commander of Qilin. He had probably spent more time by Princess Ding's side than Zhuo Jing and the others who had been Princess Ding's shadow guard. The ones who had the deepest relationship with him were naturally Zhuo Jing, Lin Han, and Wei Lin. Yili smiled faintly and glanced at Yunting as she said with a smile, if you have any questions, ask them in private. Qin Feng, is there any news from the Chu army? Qin Feng nodded and said in a low voice, Wang Fei, Genom of Gojoseon's heir Leitingfeng appeared in the Chu army's camp the day before yesterday and hasn't left. Also, 2 days ago, Mo Jingli sent Mu Yang to lead 100,000 soldiers to intercept General Lu. Mo Jingli himself has probably already set up his troops and is waiting for Wang Fei's arrival. Yi Li's eyebrows rose slightly. Leitingfeng. Qin Feng nodded and said, that's right. When Leitingfeng was in the Chu army's camp, Mo Jingli didn't give him any preferential treatment. Leitingfeng was also very well behaved and rarely raised any objections. However, it's strange that he hasn't left. Yi Li thought for a bit and asked, what did Leitingfeng say? Qin Feng said, Leitingfeng said that he was ordered by Genom of Gojoseon to follow Mo Jingli's orders. However, Mo Jingli definitely wouldn't allow Leitingfeng to come into contact with the Chu army's military power, so he kept him there as a figurehead. Since he didn't let him do anything, he naturally couldn't do anything. However, Leitingfeng didn't seem to mind at all. Yi Li thought for a bit and then said with furrowed brows, send someone to investigate whether or not Leitingfeng has brought any troops here. Qin Feng was slightly startled and said, Wang Fei means that Leitingfeng might have secretly brought troops here. He wants to wait for the Mahist army and the Chu army to both be injured and then reap the benefits. After all, on the surface, Leitingfeng hadn't brought a single soldier to the Chu army. However, this didn't mean that he couldn't place his troops in a nearby place. Yi Li shook her head and said lightly, he might not reap the benefits, but it's possible that he's looking for an opportunity to loot a burning house. Qin Feng nodded and said with a serious expression, Wang Fei, please don't worry. This subordinate will definitely investigate Leitingfeng's intentions. Wang Fei, this is the map of the Chu army that Yaoji obtained. Qin Feng presented the map in his hands. Yi Li took it and looked at it. She asked with furrowed brows, can it be trusted? Qin Feng said, this subordinate has already sent someone to check it. It's mostly trustworthy. Mostly trustworthy. Yi Li raised her brows with interest. Qin Feng said, the map is real, but there are some places where it's half real and half fake. Mo Jingli doesn't trust the generals around him. This includes the Marquis Muyang's mansion. Qin Feng could understand this. After all, the Mahist army was defeated because of this and almost caused the Prince Ding mansion to be destroyed. Although it had nothing to do with Mo Jingli would learn from his mistakes. Besides, Mo Jingli was just as suspicious as Mo Jingli. However, Mo Jingli probably didn't expect that Qin Feng didn't use the map immediately. Instead, he used the time before Yi Li arrived to send Qi Lin to check the locations one by one. Yi Li looked at the map in her hand. It was only the size of a handkerchief and was filled with all kinds of symbols. The black map was the one Qin Feng obtained from Yaoji. The red words and symbols were added or crossed out by Qin Feng after he verified them. She handed the map over to Zhuojing. Very quickly, Zhuojing returned a brand new defensive map to Yi Li. Yi Li looked at it and put it down. She asked, do you think this is complete? Chapter 965. Qin Feng thought for a moment and then shook his head. The Chu army has 800,000 soldiers, but I think that with Mo Jingli's persistence and hatred towards the Mahist army, it might be more than that. But from the map, there are less than 600,000 people. I think Mo Jingli might be hiding a trump card. Mo Jingli has grown quite a bit. Yi Li said with a faint smile. In order to deal with the Mo family army, Mo Jingli could be said to have resorted to every conceivable means. He was even able to come up with so many ideas on the defensive deployment map. This was far beyond the intelligence that Mo Jingli usually displayed. Could this be considered an extraordinary performance? If you were Mo Jingli, where would you hide the 200,000 soldiers? Yi Li asked. Qin Feng lowered his head and thought. Yunting beside him also stretched his neck to look. His lips twitched as he said, if I were Mo Jingli, I would use the 200,000 soldiers to deal with the Wang family mansion. If I could defeat Wang Fei, even if General Liu breaks through the blockade, he would be alone and surrounded on all sides. Also, If Mo Jingli completely defeats Wang Fei, it would be extremely good news for the low morale of the Chu army. At the same time, it would be a heavy blow to the morale of the Mahist army and the Prince Ding mansion. Yili smiled and said, Yunting has indeed grown quite a bit. Yunting wanted to retort that even an idiot could think of this. But then he thought, if he said that, wouldn't he be the same as an idiot? He could only laugh and say, it's because Master has taught me well. Yili looked at the map in front of her. She pointed at 3 places on the map and said, here, here, and here. What do you think? Lin Han said, if it's like this. As soon as our army leaves the Cold Valley Pass, we will immediately be surrounded by the mountain. In addition to Mo Jingli's forces on the surface, we will be surrounded by at least 300,000 soldiers. But, does Mo Jingli have that kind of brain? What if they thought too highly of themselves and Mo Jingli didn't think of it? In the end, it would be them scaring themselves. Qin Feng said, even if Mo Jingli doesn't have it, old Marquis Muyang will have it. Qin Feng had stayed in the Chu army camp for the longest time. He naturally knew a lot about old Marquis Muyang, who Mo Jingli valued the most and who was also the best fighter in the Chu army. Character did not represent ability. Even though many generals and officials of the Chu state despised old Marquis Muyang's character, no one could deny his ability. Yunting shrugged and said, if we want to surround General Liu from both sides, we have to leave the Cold Valley Pass. Even if there are 300,000 soldiers in front of us, we have to leave. We can't go back now. Maybe his master had already exterminated the Chu army and reached their destination. At that time, it would be them who were late. That wouldn't look good. Yili held her forehead and thought for a while. Then she laughed softly and said, Yunting is right. If we are late, we will harm General Liu. Hearing Yili say this, Yunting also became anxious. Princess, then what do we do? How do we pass this place? Yili thought for a while and had a plan. She said in a low voice, Yunting, lead the 150,000 soldiers to attack the Cold Valley Pass. Ah! Yunting was instantly shocked. He looked worriedly at Yili. Princess wouldn't be so anxious, right? Even though the Cold Valley Pass was not a stronghold on the border, it was the most famous ancient battlefield in the Central Plains. It was the most impregnable pass of the Central Plains. This was also the reason why LV Jinxian wanted to take a shortcut. If the two sides were at a standstill in front of the Cold Valley Pass, not to mention 150,000 people, even 500,000 people might not be able to break through the Cold Valley Pass in a few short days. Now that he knew that Mo Jingli had set up an ambush here, he probably didn't even have enough people to fill the gap between the Chu army's teeth. Yili smiled faintly and said, I'm not telling you to attack forcefully. You just have to pretend to attack forcefully. Don't let people suspect you. Yunting reacted quickly and hurriedly asked, Princess, where are you going? Since Princess had him lead the army to feign an attack, then the trap was to hide Princess' true intentions. Yili smiled faintly and said, the Buddha says, can't say. Yunting instantly became listless. He looked anxiously at Yili and said, Princess, I know you're going to do something fun. Can't you bring me along? This soldier will not hesitate to be at Princess's beck and call. Every time Princess secretly ran away, the things she did were always earth-shattering. This caused Yunting to feel admiration and jealousy towards Qin Feng, Zhuo Jing, and the others. Yili looked sardonically at him and said, right now, the only person in the army who can lead troops is you or me. Which one of us will General Yun stay behind? Yunting was dejected. If Princess didn't go, then what fun would there be? If Princess went, he couldn't go. Yili raised a hand to pat Yunting's shoulder and said with a smile, you are also very important here. How much we can do will depend on how long you can keep the Chu army under control. If you succeed, Ben Fei will personally go to General Liu to ask for a reward for you." Hearing this, Yun Ting immediately perked up. Yun Ting had just been accepted as a disciple. He had taken the time to read Lu Jinxian's letter after marching for a few days. He was full of admiration for this new master of his. He had been worried that he didn't have a battle record to show off in front of his master. Hearing Yi Li's words, he immediately perked up and said with a smile, "Don't worry, princess. This soldier promises that I won't hinder princess's plans." Yi Li nodded in satisfaction and said, "Very good, you can go." "Yes, this soldier will leave." Yun Ting raised his hands and left. He went out to count his own troops. Inside the tent, seeing Yun Ting charge out like the wind, everyone couldn't help but laugh. Lin Han said with a smile, "General Yun is almost 30, right? His personality is really straightforward." Yi Li also couldn't help but smile. In reality, Yun Ting wasn't young anymore. Even though he was one of the youngest generals with some fame in the world. Even though he had fought many bitter battles in the Mahist army, the Mahist army lacked the scheming of other armies. Yun Ting's personality was cheerful and he was Princess Ding's trusted aide. He naturally got along well with the Mahist army. Even though he was about to stand up, his personality was still as cheerful and straightforward as usual. Qin Feng looked at Yi Li and asked, "Princess, Yun Ting is holding back the Chu army and Mo Jingli. What are we going to do?" Yi Li smiled and said, "We are going to hunt." Chapter 966. At Cold Valley Pass, Mo Jingli looked down at the murderous Mahist army camp not far away. The Mahist army's black flag fluttered in the wind. Looking from afar, the entire Mahist army camp was full of vigor, like a black wave that would sweep over at any time. "Your Majesty, something's not right." Old Marquis Muyang and Lei Tingfing stood on either side of Mo Jingli. Old Marquis Muyang frowned slightly. Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows, "Something's not right. What do you mean?" Old Marquis Muyang said in a low voice, "The Mahist army looks aggressive, but they've been bluffing for the past 2 days. They haven't done anything substantial. This doesn't match the style of the Mahist army." The reason why the Mahist army was famous in the world was because of their valiant fighting power and their fearless spirit. So they definitely wouldn't stop just because of the 1,000-year pass in front of them. The only explanation was that there was another conspiracy. Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, "Yi Li only has less than 100,000 soldiers. Even if she attacks Cold Valley Pass, can she take it down? I'm afraid she's waiting for Lu Jinxian, right? As long as Muyang stops Lu Jinxian, the people in front of us will be my prisoners sooner or later." Lei Tingfing stared into the distance, deep in thought. After a while, he said indifferently, "I haven't seen Princess Ding in the past few days." Hearing this, old Marquis Muyang's expression changed and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty. Princess Ding has always been crafty, I'm afraid." Princess Ding was not only crafty, but because she had Qi Lin's help, she could appear and disappear unpredictably. Every time Princess Ding appeared, someone would be in trouble. Mo Jingli frowned. He naturally understood what old Marquis Muyang was worried about. But this time, he thought that his arrangement was flawless. No matter how smart Yi Li was, she couldn't find a loophole to take advantage of. Unfortunately, although the list that Dongfang Yu gave him solved the urgent problem of not being able to place people in Prince Ding Mansion, these people couldn't get in touch with Yi Li without arousing suspicion. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so difficult to grasp Yi Li's movements like now. Thinking, for safety's sake, Mo Jingli ordered, "Send someone to check if Yi Li is in the camp outside the pass." Old Marquis Muyang nodded hurriedly and turned around to leave to give orders. Reporting to your majesty, there's an urgent military situation. Before Marquis Muyang left, a soldier had already rushed up. Old Marquis Muyang's eyelids twitched. He had a bad premonition. The soldier who reported said, "Urgent report from the front line." The 100,000 soldiers led by Marquis Muyang were ambushed by Lu Jingxian's army. They were almost wiped out. Lu Jingxian has already bypassed the ambush set by our army and is heading towards the Cold Valley Pass. How can this be? Old Marquis Muyang couldn't help but cry out. His body swayed and he almost fell to the ground. He hurriedly asked, "How is Marquis Muyang?" The soldier looked at Mo Jingli behind him and then at old Marquis Muyang. He then said, "Marquis Muyang has brought less than 10,000 soldiers and is heading towards the Cold Valley Pass." Old Marquis Muyang heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that old Marquis Muyang was fine. But when he turned around and saw Mo Jingli's expression, he secretly complained in his heart. He had been worrying about this and that, and in the end, the one who was in trouble was his son. With Mo Jingli's personality, how could he not be angry? Sure enough, Mo Jingli glanced at old Marquis Muyang with a gloomy face and asked indifferently, "Old Marquis Muyang, what do you have to say?" Old Marquis Muyang said with a bitter face, "My son failed in the battle. Please punish him, your majesty." On the side, Lei Tingfeng's handsome eyes narrowed. He stepped forward and said in a low voice, "Emperor Chu, Marquis Muyang is still young after all. How can he defeat a veteran like Lu Jingxian who has fought for half his life? Moreover, we need people now." Mo Jingli snorted and said to old Marquis Muyang, "For the sake of Genom of Gojoseon's face, I will give him a chance to redeem himself." Old Marquis Muyang was delighted and quickly thanked, "Thank you, your majesty, for your kindness." Even the way he looked at Lei Tingfeng was more kind and grateful. "Thank you, Genom of Gojoseon." Lei Tingfeng smiled and said, "Old Marquis, you don't have to be so courteous. I am also doing this for the sake of the alliance between our two countries." In other words, the house of Marquis Muyang did not owe him a favor. Hearing this, old Marquis Muyang's expression became more kind. After all, it was not easy to owe a favor to Genom of Gojoseon of West Hill. Lei Tingfeng looked at Mo Jingli and said, "Emperor Chu, now that things have come to this, we should summon Marquis Muyang back as soon as possible and ask him about what happened. I still feel that this matter is really a little strange." Lei Tingfeng also knew a little about Mo Jingli and old Marquis Muyang's arrangement. It was almost flawless. At least Lei Tingfeng himself could not think of any flaws. Although Lei Tingfeng did not have many achievements in military affairs, he was after all taught by Lei Zhenting. His knowledge and ability were first class. If even he could not see any flaws, it proved that old Marquis Muyang and Mo Jingli's arrangement was not a big problem. Even if Muyang could not win a complete victory, he would not lose too badly. But in just a few days, Muyang's army was almost wiped out. To say that there was no problem was even more unbelievable than Mo Shioya wiping out the northern tribe's army. Hearing his words, Mo Jingli and old Marquis Muyang's expression became serious. Although old Marquis Muyang did not have much interaction with Lu Jingxian, he was still a famous general. He had some understanding of the generals in the Mahist army. Therefore, he could not believe that Lu Jingxian could break his arrangement so easily. Muyang returned very quickly. It was just that when he went out, he was in high spirits, but when he came back, he was full of scars. The original 100,000 elite soldiers were reduced to less than 6,000. This sinner, Muyang, asks for the emperor's punishment. Muyang knew very well that his bow could be said to be the first clash between the Chu army and the Mahist army, and the Chu army had suffered a crushing defeat. She was afraid that Mo Jingli would want to tear her to shreds. More importantly, his defeat almost destroyed half of the terrain advantage that the Chu army originally had. The tent was silent. The generals of the Chu army did not dare to plead for Muyang. Mo Jingli coldly looked at Muyang. There was a bloody mark on his handsome face. His shoulder was also bandaged. His left arm seemed a bit stiff. It was obvious that his injury was not light. His handsome and calm brows were filled with fatigue. Even his eyes were red. It seemed that Muyang had not been having a good time these days. "Get up." After a while, Mo Jingli said in a low voice. It was not that Mo Jingli did not want to punish Muyang. It was just that he knew that there were not many generals in the Chu army that could be used. If he punished Muyang, the old Marquis Muyang might have other thoughts. That was why he listened to Lei Tingfeng's suggestion and exempted Muyang from punishment. Lu Jingxian is a famous general of the Mahist army. I'll let this matter go. In the future, you will have to atone for your crimes. If you are negligent again, don't blame me for being ruthless. Muyang was stunned. He clearly did not expect Mo Jingli to be so lenient. The old Marquis Muyang quickly reminded him, "Why haven't you thanked the emperor for his grace?" Only then did Muyang thank Mo Jingli for his grace and stand up. "What happened this time? Tell me in detail." Mo Jingli asked in a low voice. Muyang quickly recounted the events of his defeat. In fact, not to mention others, even Muyang himself felt that his defeat was inexplicable. Muyang led 100,000 troops to reinforce. Although LV Jingxian still had the advantage in terms of numbers, the Chu army had the advantage in terms of geographical location. The Chu army had a good chance of winning. However, no one expected that on the second night after Muyang arrived, Lu Jingxian would suddenly appear behind the Chu army with 5,000 troops. In the middle of the night, the Chu army did not know how many people were attacking them. They were led by the nose by Lu Jingxian. In the end, Lu Jingxian even ignited the tung oil that was originally used to greet the Mahist army. In the end, the 100,000 troops were burned to death by the ambush that he set up. When Muyang led the remaining troops out of the sea of fire, they met Lu Jingxian's army. In the end, only a few thousand managed to escape. Chapter 967. After listening to Muyang's narration, Mo Jingli was so angry that his expression was incomparably ferocious. "That is to say, my 100,000 soldiers were completely annihilated by LV Jingxian's mere 5,000 soldiers. Good. This is great." The others were silent. 5,000 against 100,000, this battle was undoubtedly the pinnacle battle of Lu Jingxian's life. However, it was hard to believe that this battle was won by Lu Jingxian's ability. There was only one question. How did Lu Jingxian know about the Chu army's encampment and the Chu army's ambush? It must be known that if he wasn't careful, he could set the nearby mountains on fire. At that time, even if Lu Jingxian won and the fire sealed the mountains, he wouldn't be able to pass through. Old Marquis Muyang said in a deep voice, "Emperor, there are spies from the Prince Ding mansion in our army. Moreover, they are extremely important and have access to our army's secrets." It could be said that the Chu army's encampment was found by Qi Lin, but the ambush they set up, even if Qi Lin wanted to find it, it would be difficult to do so without 10 days to half a month. Other than having spies from the Prince Ding mansion in the Chu army, old Marquis Muyang couldn't think of any other explanation. Mo Jingli rolled his eyes at old Marquis Muyang. The Prince Ding mansion's shadow guards were almost everywhere. Even Mo Jingli couldn't guarantee that there weren't any Mahist army in his residence. What he said was nonsense. On the side, Lei Tingfeng said in a deep voice, "Old Marquis Muyang is right. I'm afraid, the other party is someone very close to you. Emperor Chu, you must be careful. Also, Lu Jingxian's army is approaching. Emperor Chu, please make preparations." In the battle between Lu Jingxian and Muyang, the losses were almost negligible. When the two Mahist armies approached the Cold Valley Pass one after the other, the Chu army would not only lose their geographical advantage, they might even fall into a trap. Mo Jingli said solemnly, "Pass down my decree. Order the 200,000 men of the Western Army to intercept Lu Jinxian's army with all their might. Mu Yang, Jin will give you one last chance. If you let Lu Jinxian reach the Cold Valley Pass, you should just kill yourself." Mo Jingli coldly glanced at Mu Yang. Mu Yang immediately felt a killing intent that seemed to have materialized from Mo Jingli's cold eyes. Mu Yang shuddered and hurriedly responded, "This general obeys. This general will take his leave." Mo Jingli snorted and said, "The Marquis will be in charge of investigating the spies in the Mahist army. Everyone else is dismissed. I have something to discuss with Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon." "Yes, we will take our leave," the generals replied in unison. Lei Tingfing was not surprised. Mo Jingli thought highly of himself. If he did not suffer some losses, he would not even put a little Genom of Gojoseon in his eyes. Fortunately, Lei Tingfing's personality had changed a lot. Otherwise, the two of them would have already fallen out. Only Mo Jingli and Lei Tingfing were left in the tent. Mo Jingli looked at Lei Tingfing and sighed, "I've let Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon see a joke." Lei Tingfing said respectfully, "Emperor Chu is too serious. Victory and defeat are common in war. In fact, it is not only Emperor Chu, but also Father's side is not going well. The Mahist army has shocked the world for 200 years. It is not an undeserved reputation." This was not Lei Tingfing comforting Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli naturally had his own sources of information. How could he not know that the battle between Mo Xiuyao and Lei Jinting was more intense than their side? Compared to the battle at Feihong Pass, the situation here paled in comparison. This could be said to be the first real battle between Lei Jinting and Mo Xiuyao. Naturally, it attracted the attention of the whole world. However, the battle over there did not go smoothly just because the Xiling army had the upper hand. The two armies were in a stalemate. Every battle was soul-stirring. Up until now, Lei Jinting had not been able to gain any advantage. Mo Jingli frowned and thought for a moment. Then, he said, "I can help Genom of Gojoseon." Lei Tingfing raised his eyebrows slightly. He still looked at Mo Jingli respectfully but not humbly. Lei Tingfing still remembered that Mo Jingli had married Dongfang Yu. Although the infinite boundless mountain had been completely destroyed, no one could say for sure what benefits Mo Jingli had gained from Dongfang Yu. Since Mo Jingli dared to say that he would help Lei Jinting, it was naturally not a joke. "Emperor Chu, please advise me," Lei Tingfing said. Mo Jingli smiled faintly and said, "I dare not advise you, but I still have a few people in the Prince Ding mansion that I can use." Hearing this, Lei Tingfing's heart skipped a beat. The most difficult thing to deal with in the Prince Ding mansion was not the strength of the Mahist army, nor the intelligence of Mo Xiuyao and Su Qingchen, but its almost impenetrable defense. In this world, the news that everyone knew was what the Prince Ding mansion was willing to let people know. But the news that Mo Xiuyao was not willing to let people know, they could not find out in any way. Over the years, although people from all walks of life had been persevering in placing people in the Prince Ding mansion, almost none of them were really useful. Instead, many of their own elites were lost. Seeing that Lei Tingfing seemed to be unwilling to believe, Mo Jingli was not in a hurry. He smiled faintly and said, "The crown prince of the Prince Ding mansion, Mo Yuchen, is now in Feihong Pass." Lei Tingfing's eyes flashed slightly. The whereabouts of the crown prince of the Prince Ding mansion was naturally extremely secretive in the Mahist army. Mo Jingli seemed to have known it for a long time. It seemed that there was indeed something special. Mo Jingli smiled faintly and said, "In addition, the twins of Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li are now being raised in the Su family. Lei Tingfeng's mind turned quickly, and he soon calmed down. He smiled faintly and said, "It seems that Emperor Chu's people are not in the Mahist army, but in Li City. In this case, it seems that they are not of much use to my father." Mo Jingli smiled and said, "Whether they are useful or not depends on how Genom of Gojoseon uses them." "What does Emperor Chu want?" Lei Tingfeng asked. Knowing that Lei Tingfeng had compromised, Mo Jingli smiled satisfactorily and said, "How many people did the Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon bring?" Lei Tingfeng sighed somewhat helplessly. The infinite boundless mountain is indeed a disaster. Fortunately, it has been destroyed long ago. I only have a mere 150,000 troops in my hands, but it is just a precaution. I definitely do not have any disloyalty to Emperor Chu. I naturally believe in the Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon." Mo Jingli smiled and said. Now that the two armies were in an alliance to fight against the Mahist army, Lei Tingfeng naturally would not have any thoughts. However, that would not necessarily be the case once the outcome was decided. Lei Tingfeng said, "I am willing to assist Marquis Muyang in intercepting Lu Jingxian." Mo Jingli nodded satisfactorily, writing a few words on a piece of paper and handing it over, saying, "This is a gift for Genom of Gojoseon." Lei Tingfeng glanced at it, then casually tossed the piece of paper into the charcoal fire by the side, smiling mildly and saying, "Many thanks to Emperor Chu. I will take my leave." Watching Lei Tingfeng leave, Mo Jingli laughed coldly and said, "Who said that I have no men in the Mahist army? Mo Xiaoyao. I want to see who will have the last laugh." Inside Mu Yang's tent, Yaoji was currently bandaging his wounds. Looking at the man who was riddled with wounds, Yaoji's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, not saying anything. Beside her, Mu Lai was also looking at Mu Yang, his big eyes filled with worry. "Father, are you all right?" Chapter 968. Mu Yang shook his head, raised his uninjured hand and patted Mu Lai's head. "Father is fine, don't be afraid." Mu Lai nodded and sat obediently beside Mu Yang, watching Yaoji treat his wounds. Outside the tent, a soldier reporting to Marquis, "Senior Marquis asked you to go over after treating your wounds." Mu Yang nodded, "I know, you can go." Yaoji frowned, "Why aren't you resting after suffering such a serious injury?" Mu Yang smiled helplessly, "I'm about to leave again. Father probably wants me to go over to give some orders." "Don't worry, I didn't hurt any vital parts." "But, your injuries," Mu Yang sighed, "although this defeat was caused by the Mahist army receiving the information in advance, I still lost after all. The Emperor gave me a way out and asked me to lead the army to resist Lu Jinxian's army to atone for my mistake. How can I say no so easily?" Yaoji also knew the severity of the matter and nodded, "Then you must be careful." Mu Yang smiled, "Don't worry, I'll be fine." After tidying up a little, Mu Yang went to Senior Marquis Mu Yang's tent. As soon as he went out, Yaoji and Mu Lai's face sank. Mu Lai said in a deep voice, "Marquis Mu Yang will soon suspect us." There weren't many people in the army who had access to confidential information. After eliminating all possibilities, the answer would be the most unlikely one. Yaoji smiled, "You're wrong, he will soon suspect me." Mu Lai's face sank, "You're crazy, don't think of coming out to take the blame. Don't forget, if the evidence is conclusive, do you think Mo Jingli will let me go? Moreover, with Marquis Mu Yang's intelligence, he may suspect my identity." Mu Lai and Mu Yang didn't look alike, only their eyes were a little like Yaoji's. At that time, Marquis Mu Yang would most likely suspect his identity. Yaoji sighed, "Unless it's a last resort, would I go to die? But you must be careful these days, don't pay attention to it unless there's any important news, lest you fall into Marquis Mu Yang's trap." Mu Lai nodded with a solemn expression. "I understand. I have a feeling that this matter will be over soon." Yaoji lowered her eyes and said in a low voice, "It's good that it's over. You've worked hard these past few years." Mu Lai was only 8 or 9 years old when he followed her to the Chu capital. Not only did he have to secretly help her gather information, but he also had to remind her from time to time not to make any mistakes. If it wasn't for Mu Lai's company, she really didn't know if she would have been able to hold on. Mu Lai looked at her and said, "If you can't do what Prince ordered, I'll do it." Yaoji smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry so much. When the time comes, we may not be needed." Mu Lai shook his head and said, "Since the prince has given the order, such a situation will definitely occur. Otherwise, do you think Marquis Muyang would be able to survive until now? Just based on the fact that he had almost killed the princess consort and the crown prince, the prince should have killed him back then. Just wait and see. I'm afraid that prince will send news soon." Yaoji was startled. She nodded and said, "Everything is fate. Moreover, I know what to do. I don't owe them anything. Why can't I do it?" Other than Mu Yang being her son's father, Yaoji had gradually become indifferent to him these past few years. Back then, she thought that the feelings of the sea had dried up and the rocks had faded away. Mu Lai looked at her worriedly and nodded. He secretly made up his mind. If it really came to that time, he would make the first move to gain the upper hand, so as to avoid the knot in Yaoji's heart that would be difficult to resolve in the future. On the other side, Yili sat on the back of a horse and looked at the place not far from the foot of the mountain. She smiled faintly. Her white clothes and black hair fluttered in the slightly cold breeze. "Princess consort." Qin Feng presented a letter and said in a deep voice, "General Liu has defeated Mu Yang's army of 100,000. The army is heading to the Cold Valley Pass. Shouldn't we go back?" Yili frowned. She opened the letter and said, "General Liu's battle was really shocking. But..." Qin Feng immediately let Yaoji and Mu Lai withdraw. Qin Feng was startled, but he quickly calmed down. He said quietly, "Prince has ordered that Yaoji and Mu Lai have other uses." However, Mo Xiuyao originally didn't intend to tell Yili about this matter. But now that Princess Consort wanted Yaoji and Mu Lai to withdraw, it was contrary to Mo Xiuyao's order. Qin Feng could only tell the truth. Yili was startled. She quickly understood Mo Xiuyao's intention. She sighed softly and said to Qin Feng, "You go. Try to ensure Yaoji and Mu Lai's safety." When Mo Xiuyao chose Yaoji as a spy in Chujing, Yili understood. She didn't stop him then, so she naturally wouldn't stop him now. The Marquis Mu Yang's mansion was doomed. If it could make Mo Xiuyao feel better, Yili didn't mind being more ruthless. Qin Feng nodded and said, "Thank you, Princess Consort." The lives of spies were worthless. Many people in power didn't care about the lives of spies. Because most of the spies had a great deal of information in the hands of their masters. The people in power didn't need to worry about them betraying them. If they were discovered, most of them could only die. Although the Prince Ding mansion treated their subordinates better, they couldn't take care of everyone. But Princess Ding was different. As long as it was possible, she would try her best to ensure the safety of her subordinates. Perhaps it was because of this that these people were willing to serve a woman. Princess Ding not only had the mind and strategy of a man, but also the kindness and generosity that most people in power didn't have. Yili smiled faintly and said, "I'm just doing my best. I can't protect everyone." Chapter 969. Late at night, Yaoji was sitting in the tent reading a book. Mu Lai had already fallen asleep. Mu Yang led the troops to intercept LV Jingxian. These few days, because of the matter of the spies, the control of the entire military camp had become very strict. Even the hidden guards of Prince Ding's Fu found it hard to find an opportunity to pass on any information. Yaoji understood that if this continued, it was only a matter of time before the old Marquis Muyang found out her and Mu Lai's identity. After all, they were the ones who shouldn't have appeared in the entire military camp. Unreasonable things were naturally the easiest to arouse suspicion. A cold wind blew at the entrance of the tent. Yaoji raised her head and saw Qin Feng in black standing at the entrance. She was startled and didn't have time to say anything. She grabbed Qin Feng and walked inside. Mu Lai, who was sleeping inside, opened his eyes the moment Qin Feng came in. He turned over and got off the bed. "Godfather, why are you here?" Qin Feng raised his hand and patted Mu Lai's little head. "You are in danger now. I will take you out of here." Yaoji frowned, but Yaoji understood that Qin Feng's arrival might be the princess's idea. But if she couldn't complete the task given by Prince Ding, not only her, but even Mu Lai and Qin Feng would be in trouble. Qin Feng looked at her with understanding. "Go and deal with Muyang now. Marquis Muyang will soon suspect you. If you continue to stay here, not only will you be in danger, the shadow guard hidden in the military will also be a threat." Mu Lai nodded and started to pack up his things. In fact, there was nothing to pack. Although they brought a lot of things with Muyang, there was almost nothing to take away. Yaoji nodded and frowned worriedly. "The entire military camp is under martial law now. How can we get out? Besides, if she and Mu Lai suddenly disappeared from the army, Marquis Muyang would immediately suspect them." Qin Feng smiled faintly. "Since you can come in, you can naturally go out. We have no choice but to leave now. Marquis Muyang will definitely suspect you." Mu Lai pulled Yaoji's hand and said in a deep voice, "Mother, let's go. Once we're done here, we'll be able to return to Glass City." Yaoji was startled, and her expression also changed slightly. That's right, as long as they were done here, they could return to Glass City. Mu Lai no longer needed a child to follow him around all day in fear. He could even see his son. "Let's go." Qin Feng nodded with satisfaction. Soon, there were noises of people shouting to catch the assassin, and they could feel that they were coming over. Qin Feng grabbed Yaoji and pretended to be Mu Yang, who was holding her hostage. He then threw Mu Lai to the Mahist army shadow guard waiting outside the tent. In the eyes of outsiders, it was as if the spies of the Prince Ding mansion had been discovered and were chased here by the Chu army to kidnap Yaoji and her son. After all, Mu Lai was the only grandson of the Marquis Muyang residence. The Chu army did not dare to be too heavy-handed. It was inevitable that their hands and feet were tied. When old Marquis Muyang arrived, Qin Feng and the others had already rushed to the periphery of the Chu army's camp with Yaoji. Old Marquis Muyang deeply understood that ever since the expedition, everything had gone wrong. Mu Yang's crushing defeat to Lu Jingxian made Imo Jingli extremely disappointed in the Marquis Muyang residence. If the spies of the Prince Ding mansion were to escape because of Yaoji and Mu Lai, the Marquis Muyang residence would really be unlucky. Moreover, Marquis Muyang also had some doubts in his heart. How could it be so coincidental that the spies of the Prince Ding mansion would kidnap Yaoji? Seeing this situation, old Marquis Muyang made a prompt decision and shouted sternly, "Catch the assassin at all costs." "Grandfather." Mu Lai was held in the arms of the shadow guard and cried out with a sobbing tone. Old Marquis Muyang's heart trembled. In the end, he hardened his heart and said, "Release the arrows." Mu Lai was his only grandson, but when it concerned the survival of the entire Marquis Muyang residence, old Marquis Muyang residence did not hesitate to abandon this grandson. As long as the Marquis Muyang residence was still around, as long as Mu Yang was still around, naturally, he would still have a grandson in the future. Long arrows shot towards Qin Feng and the others like rain, but at this time, they were already outside the Chu army's camp. Moreover, the people who came with Qin Feng were the elites of the Qi Lin. After a while, everyone disappeared into the night. Old Marquis Muyang residents stared in the direction where the black-clothed men disappeared in a daze for a long time. After so many years together, old Marquis Muyang residents still doted on Mu Lai very much. Although he abandoned him for the sake of the Marquis Muyang residents, it did not mean that he did not feel heartache. Now, he only hoped that the spies of the Prince Ding mansion would not disregard human life and would leave him a way out. Old Marquis, His Majesty summons you. Behind him, the imperial bodyguard hurried over and said in a deep voice. Old Marquis Muyang resident sighed, nodded and turned to head towards Mo Jingli's tent. In the tent, Mo Jingli stared at old Marquis Muyang residents and asked, "Has the spy been caught?" Old Marquis Muyang residents lowered his head and said, "The spy has escaped, please punish me, His Majesty." Mo Jingli's face darkened, but he did not flare up. He only said lightly, "I heard that Marquis Muyang residents' wife and child were taken away by assassins." Old Marquis Muyang residents nodded and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." Mo Jingli stared coldly at old Marquis Muyang residents and asked, "What does old Marquis Muyang residents think about the spies of the Prince Ding mansion?" Old Marquis Muyang residents was stunned, he did not understand the meaning of Mo Jingli's words. Mo Jingli continued, "What a coincidence. Marquis Muyang residents' military plan was leaked. Tonight, the spies of the Prince Ding mansion happened to kidnap Marquis Muyang residents' wife and child. In addition, if they wanted to kidnap, wouldn't it be more convenient to just take away the little heir? I really don't understand, what's the value of them taking away a concubine who used to be a dancer? Old Marquis, what do you think?" Hearing Mo Jingli's words, old Marquis Muyang residents only felt his heartbeat quicken, his forehead instantly covered in dense cold sweat. The emperor actually suspected that Yaoji was the Prince Ding mansion spy. If the emperor took it seriously, then Marquis Muyang residents would really be finished. Your Majesty is wise. Marquis Muyang residents is loyal and devoted to the Chu state. With a plop, old Marquis Muyang residents knelt on the ground and said hurriedly. Mo Jingli lightly snorted and said, "Get up. I was just a little curious. You must continue to investigate the Prince Ding mansion spy. If there are any more leaks of information, I will definitely execute them without mercy." Yes, this official accepts the order. Old Marquis Muyang residents breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly responded. However, he was shocked and made up his mind to investigate this matter thoroughly. If there really was a problem with that Yaoji, then he would have a plan to deal with it. Just as Mo Jingli's mood was extremely bad, there was an endless stream of even worse news coming in. Early in the morning, Mo Jingli had just gotten up and didn't even have time to eat breakfast when an urgent report came in from outside. Reporting to the emperor, the 4 troops our army arranged in the dark have been attacked one after another by the Mahist army and have suffered heavy losses. What? Mo Jingli, who was just about to eat, accidentally knocked over the soup bowl on the table. He suddenly stood up and said, "Summon all generals for an audience." After receiving the order, all the generals in the Chu army's camp hurriedly rushed over in a short while. Seeing Mo Jingli's expression, everyone knew that something bad had happened. They were afraid that something big had happened. Chapter 970. Mo Jingli wasn't in the mood to pay attention to their thoughts. He threw the urgent report on the ground and said, "Take a look." Old Marquis Muyang, who was standing at the front, bent down to pick it up. His expression immediately changed as he said in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid we've really been tricked by Yunting. Princess Ding isn't even in the Mahist army. 2 days ago, they sent someone to investigate and the report they got back was that Princess Ding was in the army. Now that they thought about it, it was probably just Yunting's trick. Princess Ding wasn't even in Cold Valley Pass from the beginning. Yi Li. Yi Li. Mo Jingli gnashed his teeth in anger. If that's the case, don't blame I for being ruthless. Mo Jingli was so angry that he even forgot to call himself the emperor. Pass down my order, exterminate Yunting's army immediately. Mo Jingli said sternly. Yes, your majesty. Looking at Mo Jingli's ferocious expression, the generals didn't dare to say more and just accepted the order in a low voice. A guard hurried to Mo Jingli with a letter and presented it with both hands. Mo Jingli opened the letter and glanced at the people below coldly. Finally, his gaze fell on old Marquis Muyang's outstretched hand. He said indifferently, Marquis Muyang, stay here. The rest of you can leave. Everyone looked at old Marquis Muyang sympathetically and left one after another. Mo Jingli held the letter in his hand and looked at old Marquis Muyang coldly. Old Marquis Mu, do you know what you wrote in this letter? Old Marquis Muyang's heart tightened. He knew it was probably related to him. He thought for a while and asked carefully, Your Majesty. Is it about Yaoji and Mu Lai last night? Old Marquis Muyang felt very complicated. He didn't know if he was worried about Yaoji's relationship with the Prince Ding mansion or Mu Lai's life or death. Mo Jingli sneered, Senior Marquis Mu, I remember that Yaoji was missing for several years. Old Marquis Muyang nodded, Yes, Your Majesty. Do you know where Yaoji was and what she did during those years? Mo Jingli asked. Old Marquis Muyang's back was drenched in sweat, he dared not answer. Mo Jingli slammed the letter on the desk and said sternly, Yaoji was in Glass City during those years. And he even opened a tea house. Good job. I trusted the house of Marquis Muyang so much. It turns out that the traitor was right beside me. Old Marquis Muyang's legs turned to jelly as he knelt on the ground. Your Majesty. Your Majesty is wise. Those were all done by that bitch Yaoji. Marquis Muyang's mansion had nothing to do with the Prince Ding mansion. This old minister and Prince Ding have enmity. How could this old minister rely on Prince Ding? Your Majesty, please understand. Mo Jingli narrowed his eyes and said, You can't. Then what about Muyang? Since ancient times, women have always been a hero's grave. Would Muyang rely on the Prince Ding mansion because of Yaoji? 100,000 men couldn't defeat Lu Jinxian's 5,000 men, and he even came back alive. Old Marquis Muyang, how can I trust you? Many things will be fine if you don't think about it. Once you think about it, a lot of questions will come to your mind and you can't stop them. Mo Jingli was a suspicious person. What's more, the house of Marquis Muyang wasn't loyal to him from the beginning. Since Marquis Muyang could betray Mo Jingqi and pledge loyalty to him, naturally, he could betray him and pledge loyalty to Mo Xiuyao. Thinking of this, his gaze on old Marquis Muyang became more and more unfriendly. Old Marquis Muyang secretly complained in his heart, but he also understood that no matter how much he tried to explain, Mo Jingli would only think that he was quibbling. In his heart, he just wanted to skin Yaoji and pull out her tendons. He never thought that he would be tricked by his son's woman in the end. Your Majesty. Old Marquis Muyang opened his mouth and wanted to say something. Mo Jingli didn't want to listen to him anymore. He snorted and said, Enough. I don't want to listen to you anymore. Old Marquis Muyang quickly shook his head and said, No. Your Majesty, please listen to me. Yaoji, that bitch, will definitely go to Yang He after leaving the camp. I beg you, Your Majesty. Mo Jingli sneered and said, I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. Don't worry, you will be reunited with Muyang soon. Guards, go away. He was grabbed by the guards and dragged out of the tent without any hesitation. Old Marquis Muyang knew that the situation was hopeless. It was useless to say anything more, so he could only shut his mouth. In the camp of the Chu Army's West Army, Mu Yang was discussing military matters with General Shi Shi and Lei Tingfeng. A guard came in and reported, "General Mu, there is a child outside who wants to see you. He said he is the heir of the Marquis Mu Yang's residence." Mu Yang was slightly startled. He was a little curious why Mu Lai came to find him alone. Lei Tingfeng's eyes flashed and said with a smile, "Brother Mu, you should go and see if anything happened to the heir first." Mu Yang nodded. Mu Lai's sudden arrival also made him a little worried about what happened. Lei Tingfeng's suggestion was naturally to his liking. He stood up and cupped his hands towards Lei Tingfeng and said, "Thank you, heir." When he left the camp, he saw Mu Lai standing outside in a mess and shivering. It was only the beginning of February, and the north was still chilly. Mu Lai was wearing tattered clothes. Even his lips had turned purple from all the movement. Mu Yang hurriedly took off his clothes and hugged him. He asked anxiously, "Lai, why are you here alone?" Mu Lai's trembling lips moved and said, "Mother, mother." Before he could say anything, tears flowed out first. Mu Yang was shocked and hurriedly asked, "What happened to your mother?" Mu Lai looked at Mu Yang in a daze. Finally, he burst into tears. Seeing him like this, it was obvious that he was frightened. Mu Yang hugged him tenderly and said softly, "Good child, don't be afraid. Come and tell father, what happened?" Mu Lai leaned into Mu Yang's arms and said while sobbing, bad people took mother and Lai away. After that, Lai escaped. I wanted to go back and ask grandfather to save mother, but they said grandfather was captured by the emperor. Wah, father, save mother, save grandfather. What? Mu Yang was taken aback by such a drastic change. He supported Mu Lai and asked, "You said your grandfather was captured by the emperor? Why?" Mu Lai was stunned. He shook his head and said, I don't know. Lai heard it from someone else. Lai didn't dare to go back, so I begged a kind uncle to bring Lai to find father." Mu Lai was young, so his words were also intermittent and disjointed. Mu Yang couldn't help but panic. Lei Tingfeng, who followed them out, also heard their conversation. He looked thoughtfully at Mu Lai, who was sobbing in Mu Yang's arms, and said in a low voice, "Brother Mu, don't be anxious. Ask properly first. Besides, the Cold Valley Pass isn't far from here. If something really happened, news should come quickly. Little heir, how did you get here?" The Cold Valley Pass wasn't far from here, but it wasn't near either. No matter what, it was still a distance of 200 miles. How could a child come all the way here alone? Mu Lai sobbed and shook his head in Mu Yang's arms. He said, "Wah. I don't know. I rode here." Chapter 971. You rode a horse here? Lei Tingfeng raised his eyebrows. Whose horse? Who brought you here? Woo-woo. I don't know. Father, save mother. She's lost a lot of blood. Lai is scared. Mu Yang hurriedly pulled him into his arms and patted him gently. Okay, don't be scared. It's okay now. Lai is good. After bringing Mu Lai into his tent, Mu Yang carefully questioned him. Only then did he find out what had happened from Mu Lai's mouth. It turned out that 2 days after Mu Yang left, the Maoist army spies hidden in the army couldn't sit still anymore. They were discovered by the Chu army and took Mu Lai and Yaoji hostage when they escaped. After that, Yaoji tried to help Mu Lai escape. Mu Lai wanted to go back and ask his grandfather to help save his mother, but he heard that the old Marquis Mu Yang was also captured. That was why he begged a kind passerby to send him here. Mu Yang was already worried when he heard Mu Lai's words. Lei Dingfeng, who was also present, was also much calmer. At the same time, he noticed more details that Mu Yang didn't notice. Lei Dingfeng smiled at Mu Lai and asked, "Little heir, where is the person who sent you here?" Mu Yang heard this and couldn't help but frown. "Brother Lei, what do you mean?" Mu Yang and Lei Dingfeng got along well these days, so Mu Yang didn't want to embarrass Lei Dingfeng. However, Lei Dingfeng's question made him feel a little uncomfortable. Lei Dingfeng smiled. "Brother Mu, there is a war here. Don't you think it's strange that the little heir could meet a passerby riding a horse? Normally, people would stay away from places where there was a war. Why would someone have the leisure to send a child to the military camp on a horse?" Mu Yang looked at Lei Dingfeng angrily. "Brother Lei, are you saying that Lai is lying?" Lei Dingfeng frowned slightly. "Brother Mu, you misunderstood. That's not what I meant. It's just a little strange. The little heir is still young. It's inevitable that he will be used." Mu Yang took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "No matter what, let's find out what's going on first. Brother Lei, I'll have to trouble you with the army for a few days. I have to make a trip back." "No." Mu Lai grabbed Mu Yang's hand tightly and refused to let go. "Father, don't go back. His Majesty will kill you," they said. His Majesty wanted to capture her father and kill him along with her grandfather. Lai didn't want his father to die. Woo woo. Mu Yang's face turned even uglier. He believed most of Mu Lai's words, but he didn't understand why the emperor wanted to capture his father. Just as he was deep in thought, a sharp voice came from outside the door. "The imperial edict has arrived. Marquis Mu Yang, receive the decree." Mu Yang hurriedly settled Mu Lai down and hurriedly left the tent. When he saw the expression of the eunuch beside Imo Jingli standing in the middle of the tent, his heart couldn't help but sink. "Your subject, Mu Yang, receives the decree." Mu Yang respectfully knelt down to receive the decree. That eunuch glanced at Mu Yang and opened the bright yellow imperial edict in his hand. He said in a deep voice, "Marquis Mu Yang's residents colluded with the Prince Ding mansion and committed treason. Mu Yang's military power will be removed and he will be escorted back to the camp. Choose a day to deal with him." That eunuch closed the imperial edict and ordered in a sharp voice, "Why aren't you arresting Mu Yang?" "Wait." Mu Yang said in a clear voice, "May I ask eunuch, when did Mu Yang collude with the Prince Ding mansion? When did I commit treason?" That eunuch sneered and said, "You'll have to ask Marquis Mu Yang himself. I'm here on His Majesty's order to arrest him. Don't tell me Marquis Mu Yang wants to defy the edict." Mu Yang gritted his teeth and said, "If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext." Mu Yang is not convinced. The eunuch sneered, "Not convinced? If Marquis Mu Yang has anything to say, just say it in front of His Majesty. I'm here on orders. I hope Marquis Mu Yang will not make things difficult. But I'm afraid Marquis Mu Yang has nothing to say. Old Marquis Mu Yang was beheaded this morning." "What? Father?" Mu Yang's face changed greatly. He didn't expect Mu Lai to say that his father was captured by Imo Jingli and was beheaded so quickly. That eunuch acted as if he didn't see Mu Yang's face change. He said proudly, "Marquis Mu Yang should just obediently surrender. Your father has already confessed that Marquis Mu Yang colluded with the Prince Ding mansion." Mu Yang's face turned green and white. He knew his family's situation better than anyone else. If it was possible, his father naturally wouldn't refuse to seek refuge with the Prince Ding mansion. But the problem was that when his father acted on Imo Jingqi's order to attack Princess Ding, he had already formed a huge enmity with the Prince Ding mansion. Even if he sought refuge with anyone, he would never seek refuge with the Prince Ding mansion. How could his father admit to such a ridiculous crime? Unless it was a confession made under torture. Thinking of this, Mu Yang was indescribably sad and indignant. My Mu family is loyal and devoted to His Majesty, but His Majesty treats human life like grass. How can a loyal official not be bitterly disappointed? That eunuch frowned and waved his hand impatiently. Take down Marquis Mu Yang so that we can go back and report. The guards on his left and right hurriedly stepped forward to capture Mu Yang. Although Mu Yang was young, Marquis Mu Yang had spent half his life in glory. Moreover, he was also very good at conducting himself. There were also many loyal family generals in the Marquis Mu Yang mansion. Old Marquis Mu Yang was inexplicably beheaded by the emperor. How could these people let Mu Yang be captured? For a moment, the relationship between both sides became tense. By the time General Shibei arrived, most of the people brought by the eunuch had already been killed. Only 2 guards were left and they managed to escape from the barracks. Several li away from the military camp, the eunuch who delivered the decree looked at the people standing not far away with a pale face. His limbs were weak. The last 2 guards beside him also collapsed in front of him. That eunuch was also very good at reading people's expressions. He hurriedly stepped forward and said with a flattering smile, "Commander Qin, this lowly one did as you said. That Mu Yang was so daring that he actually killed the guard sent by His Majesty. Commander Qin, please spare this lowly one's life." Qin Feng looked back at the flattering eunuch in front of him and said with a smile, "You don't have to worry. I won't kill you." That eunuch was stunned, but his heart was overjoyed. He originally thought that delivering the decree would be a simple task. He didn't expect that he would be captured by the people from the Prince Ding mansion before he even set off. In the end, he could only deceive Mu Yang according to Qin Feng's words. Old Marquis Mu Yang was killed. He even almost became a ghost under Mu Yang's blade. Now that he finally got his life back, he was naturally overjoyed. "Not only will I not kill you, I will also send someone to send you back safely. Do you know what to say when you go back? This lowly one understands, this lowly one understands." Mu Yang dared to defy the decree and even killed the emperor's envoy. He intended to rebel. That eunuch quickly said. Qin Feng nodded with satisfaction, "Very good. I like to deal with smart people." Chapter 972. Mu Yang's face turned even uglier as he watched the eunuch who delivered the decree leave in a sorry state. His father's unjust death, Yaoji's disappearance, and Mo Jingli's suspicions were all like a mountain pressing down on Mu Yang's head. Mu Yang's face turned ashen as he looked at the corpses of the imperial guards all over the ground. The general of the western region, Zhao Lian, had some friendship with the old Marquis Mu Yang. When he heard the news and rushed over, the situation in front of him was already out of control. However, although he had a friendship with the old Marquis Mu Yang, it wasn't deep enough for him to gamble his family's name for this friendship. He could only order someone to put Mu Yang under house arrest in the army and personally write a letter to have it sent to Mo Jingli's hands on a horse. Unfortunately, he didn't know that his memorial had turned into a pile of ashes less than 20 li away from the army camp. Zhao Lian and Lei Tingfeng were both sitting in Mu Yang's tent. They couldn't help but sigh as they watched Mu Yang hugging the sleeping Mu Lai. To be honest, neither Zhao Lian nor Lei Tingfeng believed that the Marquis Mu Yang's residents would seek refuge with the Prince Ding mansion. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but that they couldn't. Lei Tingfeng felt that something was wrong, but the old Marquis Mu Yang was dead. He was afraid that Mu Yang. Thinking of this, Lei Tingfeng secretly gave Zhao Lian a look. Zhao Lian sighed helplessly in his heart. He was considered a veteran of the Dechu state. Although he hadn't fought any earth-shattering battles in his life, he could be said to be experienced and knowledgeable. Originally, Mo Jingli's decision to go to the north had caused many people to secretly mutter in their hearts. Now that the war had just begun, the emperor had already executed one of his important subordinates. This caused many people to feel uneasy. The soldiers who were close to the Marquis Muyang's residence were even more indignant. If Muyang had any other intentions, the army would be in chaos. Originally, for the sake of the stability of the army, Zhao Lian should have made a prompt decision to arrest Muyang. However, half of the generals in his camp were either Marquis Muyang's former subordinates or had an old relationship with Marquis Muyang's mansion. Not to mention the emperor, even Zhao Lian himself was occasionally secretly worried in his heart. Could it be that Marquis Muyang's household really had some ulterior motives? Marquis Muyang. After thinking about it, Zhao Lian decided to persuade him first. With Lu Jinxian's army at the border, the army could not afford to fall into chaos. Muyang smiled bitterly. General Zhao is too polite. Am I still some Marquis Muyang? Zhao Lian sighed and said, there must be some misunderstanding. This old man has personally written a report to explain to the emperor. General, please don't be impatient. Even if there was some misunderstanding, Mo Jinglake shouldn't have killed my father. Muyang said sternly, a trace of shocking hatred flashing through his eyes. Zhao Lian was secretly shocked. This time, no matter what, the house of Marquis Muyang would be at odds with the emperor. Mother. In Muyang's arms, Mu Lai let out a small sob in his sleep. Muyang's heart ached even more. He picked up Mu Lai and got up to walk out. Muyang, where are you going? Zhao Lian quickly asked. Muyang turned back and said in a low voice, I'm going to save Yaoji. In this situation, how could Zhao Lian dare to let him lead the troops away? He quickly said, how do you know where Madame Mu is now? Let's send someone to investigate first. Besides, you should know that once you leave. If Muyang really left like this, he would become a traitor even if he didn't. Muyang sneered and said, it's already like this. Do I still care about these things? Zhao Lian gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, fine, I won't stop you if you want to leave. But you can't take the troops away. If Muyang took the troops away, his life wouldn't be far away. Muyang sneered. If he left alone, he wouldn't be able to do anything. As long as Mo Jinglei sent someone to hunt him down, they would be able to kill him, not to mention saving people. At the side, Lei Tingfeng frowned and said, Marquis Muyang, don't be impatient. Don't you think this matter is a little strange? Muyang and Zhao Lian looked at Lei Tingfeng at the same time. Lei Tingfeng said in a low voice, Emperor Chu isn't a fool. If he really wanted to kill Marquis Muyang, why would he spread the news of the old Marquis Muyang's death so quickly and only send a dozen guards to deliver the decree? Isn't he afraid that Marquis Muyang will disobey the decree and even rebel on the spot? Muyang looked at Lei Tingfeng and said coldly, does Genom of Gojoseon mean that my father is fine? Or is the person who delivered the decree not Mo Jingli's men but someone else in disguise? Lei Tingfeng was speechless. They also knew the people around Mo Jingli. If it was a disguise, it was impossible to be flawless in front of so many people. They had even seen those dead imperial guards in Mo Jingli's army before. How could it be a fake? After a long time, Lei Tingfeng sighed and said, Brother Mu, if you believe me, wait for another day. Let us figure out the news from the camp first. At that time, if it's true, I will personally escort Brother Mu out of the camp. If Emperor Chu blames me, I will also bear the responsibility. It will also save General Zhao a lot of trouble. Zhao Lian naturally agreed when he heard this. No matter what, it was most important to stabilize Muyang first. Otherwise, there would be a mutiny in the army soon. He nodded and said, Lei is right. Nephew, if it's true, this old man won't stop you. Muyang was silent for a moment. Finally, he nodded and said, "All right, let's wait for another day." In the Chu army's camp, Mo Jingli gloomily stared at the trembling eunuch kneeling before him. He said in a deep voice, "What did you say?" The eunuch who delivered the decree had a pale face. He said in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty, please spare my life. Your Majesty, please spare my life, this servant is incompetent." Marquis Muyang refused to accept the decree and even said, "Marquis Muyang's household is loyal and devoted to the Dechu state. Your Majesty is muddle-headed and harmed the loyal. He killed all the imperial guards sent by your Majesty. Fortunately, General Shishi arrived in time and saved this servant's life." While speaking, the eunuch was already sobbing. He had a frightened and timid appearance. Mo Jingli stared at him for a long time. He saw that the eunuch's clean clothes were stained with blood and dust. His expression was also full of exhaustion and fear, as well as pain. It was obvious that he had also suffered some injuries. Good Marquis Muyang, good Muyang. Bring Mu Jingming here for me." Mu Jingming was old Marquis Muyang's real name. However, he was conferred the title of Marquis Muyang when he was young. Therefore, there were very few people who called him by his real name. Not long after, old Marquis Muyang was escorted into the tent by the imperial guards. It had only been 2 days, but old Marquis Muyang, who was originally full of energy, had aged a lot. His originally white hair was a little messy and his pair of sharp eyes had also become a little dim. Life in prison naturally wouldn't be that good. He looked old and powerless. "Mu Jingming, what else do you have to say?" Mo Jingli asked sternly. Old Marquis Muyang was startled. He didn't understand what had happened to make Mo Jingli so angry. Then, he glanced at the eunuch who was kneeling in a sorry state. Old Marquis Muyang's heart shook and he seemed to have understood something. "This servant has been wronged. Your Majesty, please investigate." Although he had already guessed what had happened, old Marquis Muyang couldn't admit it. He could only play dumb. Mo Jingli sneered, "Investigate. You said that Muyang didn't have any rebellious thoughts. But he dared to kill the imperial guards that I sent to deliver the imperial edict. He dared to scold me for being muddle-headed. Is this what you meant by Marquis Muyang's residents being loyal and devoted to the Chu state?" Chapter 973. Your Majesty, this must be a misunderstanding. My son would never be so rude. Old Marquis Muyang said anxiously. He knew Muyang's character, he would never act so impulsively. Moreover, he was still in the Chu army's camp. Even if Muyang was afraid of breaking the vases, he would never rashly kill the person the emperor sent to deliver the decree. The eunuch kneeling at the side had a thought and screamed, "Old Marquis Mu, are you saying that we are lying to the emperor? Are we framing Marquis Muyang? Your Majesty, this servant has been wronged. Please send someone you trust to investigate, so this servant will not be wronged." Thousands of soldiers witnessed Marquis Muyang killing the guard sent by Your Majesty. This servant does not believe that Marquis Muyang can shut so many people's mouths. Moreover, although General Shilu only arrived after the incident, Heir Genom of Gojoseon was present from the beginning to the end. Your Majesty, please investigate. Seeing the eunuch's grief and indignation, Mo Jingli believed him even more. Moreover, he had already suspected the house of Marquis Muyang. The people below were only adding fuel to the fire. With a sneer, Mo Jingli said, "Of course I will investigate. Gao Ming. Bring my decree and tell General Shilu Zhao Lian to bring Muyang to me. If he disobeys, execute him on the spot." A general stepped out and cupped his hands. This general obeys. This general will definitely bring Muyang back to beg for forgiveness. Mo Jingli snorted. He was not interested in whether Muyang would beg for forgiveness or not. He was only worried that Mu Yang would bring the hundreds of thousands of soldiers under him for breakfast. After all, the Mu family still had some influence in the Dechu state's army. After thinking for a while, Mo Jingli said, "I will give you another 50,000 elite soldiers to assist General Shi Lu in defending against Lu Jinxian's troops." "Yes, thank you, Your Majesty." Gao Ming thanked him loudly. Of course, he understood Mo Jingli's meaning. These 50,000 elite soldiers were not really for him to defend against Lu Jinxian. If Mu Yang had any strange movements, he would be able to join forces with General Shi Lu to suppress him. Old Marquis Mu Yang looked at the tall and upright Gao Ming, who seemed to be full of righteousness, and felt a sense of despair in his heart. It was impossible for anyone to only have friends and not have enemies. Coincidentally, Gao Ming and the Mu family had always been at odds. The Mu family was a family of generals. Gao Ming and Mu Yang were close in age, but Mu Yang's family background was far from what Gao Ming, who came from a humble background, could compare with. Therefore, even though Gao Ming had followed Mo Jingli since he was still a prince with no real power, after Mo Jingli ascended the throne, his status was still far inferior to Mo Jingli. It could be said that the entire Chu army knew that the two of them were not on good terms. Mo Jingli sent him over. Although he might have been worried that Mu Yang would be merciful because of his good relationship with him. However, sending Gao Ming was equivalent to cutting off the house of Marquis Mu Yang. Old Marquis Mu Yang fell to the ground dejectedly. Mo Jingli didn't even bother to look at him and left in a huff. The eunuch who had been kneeling at the side hurriedly got up and ordered people to bring old Marquis Mu Yang back to the prison to be closely guarded. Old Marquis Mu Yang glared fiercely at the eunuch. He keenly felt that there must be something wrong. However, he was currently imprisoned by Mo Jingli. Even if he wanted to investigate the truth, he couldn't do anything. That eunuch looked around to make sure there was no one around. Suddenly, he approached old Marquis Mu Yang and laughed softly. He lowered his voice and said, "Old Marquis, don't blame me. Who told you to offend someone you shouldn't? It really is you." Old Marquis Mu Yang scolded harshly. "What are you still standing there for? Why aren't you taking him away and guarding him properly? If the Prince Ding Mansion rescues him, none of us will be able to live." That eunuch waved his hand and said sharply. Old Marquis Mu Yang was dragged out without any resistance. A day later, the news that came made everyone feel very helpless. Reporting to the great general, the emperor ordered General Gao Ming to lead 50,000 elite troops to assist the great general. The tent was instantly filled with a heavy atmosphere. The general of the Marquis Mu Yang's expression was extremely ugly. Mu Yang sneered, 50,000 elite troops to assist General Zhao. His words were full of mockery. Everyone present understood what he meant by help. What could 50,000 men do? Right now, there were more than 100,000 soldiers of the Western Army in the camp. Mu Yang had 100,000 soldiers and Lei Tingfeng had more than 100,000 soldiers. The total military strength was more than 400,000. The military strength was already twice that of Lu Jinxian. Right now, these 50,000 soldiers were probably not used to deal with Lu Jinxian. They were used to guard against Mu Yang. Zhao Lian let out a long sigh and asked, "Where is General Gao?" The soldier reported, "General Gao's army is already 30 li away." In addition, General Gao sent an order. Marquis Mu Yang intends to rebel. General, please take him down immediately. When General Gao arrives, he can be escorted back to the camp for the emperor to deal with. As soon as the words came out, the generals of the Marquis Mu Yang's residence all stood up and stared at everyone with an unfriendly expression. Just when Zhao Lian was in a dilemma, the sound of war drums came from outside the camp. Zhao Lian was shocked. He quickly made a decision and said in a deep voice, "The Mahist army is calling for a fight." Generals, follow this general out of the camp to meet them. After that, he walked out directly without caring about Muyang and the others. Fing stood up and looked at Muyang, who was standing on the side. He sighed and shook his head and followed out. In the tent, the remaining generals of the Marquis Muyang's residence asked in a low voice, "Marquis, we..." Muyang closed his eyes and said decisively, "Those who are willing to stay, follow General Zhao out of the camp to meet them. Those who are willing to follow me, we will leave now." Among the people present, a few silently left and followed Zhao Lian out. The rest were all willing to follow Muyang. Although their choices were different, no one was in the mood to despise anyone at this time. It was not an easy path to follow Muyang. The Marquis Muyang's residence was not as powerful as the Prince Ding mansion. It was not like you could become a king just because you brought an army with you. Those who were willing to follow Muyang could be said to be the confidants of the Marquis Muyang's residence. If not, they were the saviors of the Marquis Muyang's residence. Muyang glanced at the crowd and said in a deep voice, "Muyang thanks everyone. Go back and gather your troops. We will leave immediately." Therefore, outside the camp, two groups of troops left the camp one after the other, but they went to different places. When Muyang came, he brought 100,000 troops with him. However, only 30,000 to 40,000 people followed him. Looking at the direction Muyang left with his troops, Zhao Lian sighed slightly. There was a hint of regret in his somewhat bleak eyes. Muyang probably wouldn't be able to go far in the future. Originally, if he was given time, Muyang would become a general not inferior to his father. But now, Muyang only had 30 to 40,000 men. He had neither rations nor reinforcements. It could be said that his future was already sealed. Fing stood beside Zhao Lian and asked faintly, "General Zhao, won't you regret letting him go just like that?" Zhao Lian sighed and said, "This old man has done his best. It's better than a mutiny." Fing nodded in agreement. Letting Muyang take 30,000 to 40,000 people away would not be a big hindrance to the army. However, if Muyang was really captured or killed, the generals who were originally on good terms with the Marquis Muyang's residence would inevitably feel sympathy. At that time, if they were instigated by someone with ulterior motives, the loss would not be limited to these 30,000 to 40,000 people. Chapter 974. However, how are you going to explain this to Emperor Chu? Mo Jingli was not a magnanimous person who cared about the big picture. He probably wouldn't be able to see Zhao Lian retreat for the sake of the army's safety. He would only see Zhao Lian disobeying the decree and letting Muyang go. Zhao Lian smiled bitterly and said, "This old man will do his best. Moreover, I might die on the battlefield at any time. What's the point of thinking so much?" To be honest, this old man really doesn't have much confidence in dealing with Lu Jingxian. Seeing how the Marquis Muyang was dealt with, Zhao Lian's heart was not completely unaffected. However, as a subject, if the emperor wants the subject to die, the subject must die. General is righteous. Fing praised sincerely. On the other hand, Muyang had only left the camp for 4 hours before he met with Gao Ming's army. Originally, the two armies would not meet so quickly. However, when Gao Ming was about to reach the camp, he received news that Muyang had already escaped with his army. He immediately turned his troops around and chased after them. At the same time, he quickly sent a letter to Mo Jingli's camp, stating that Muyang had already led his army to betray him. He even did not forget to complain about Zhao Lian. Gao Ming always felt that he had worked so hard for Mo Jingli all these years. However, he was always suppressed by these generals from large families. Now that he had the opportunity, how could he let it go? When the two armies met, Gao Ming immediately gave the order to charge forward. Amidst the chaos, there were countless casualties. Just as Gao Ming was feeling pleased with himself, he saw a group of black soldiers charging out from the side and surrounding the two armies that were fighting. Gao Ming saw the black flag fluttering in the wind and was so scared that he almost fell off his horse. He shouted in fear, "Mahist army! Black Cloud Cavalry!" Mu Yang's face also darkened. He vaguely felt that something was wrong. The Black Cloud Cavalry's strength was naturally not something that these normal Chu army soldiers could compare to. After a series of rampage, the Chu army's formation was immediately shattered. The leading black-clothed man said in a deep voice, "If you are willing to submit to the Prince Ding mansion, then stop immediately." The black-clothed man's voice carried a deep internal energy that spread in all directions. These soldiers were already dizzy from the sudden infighting. Now, they were frightened by the Black Cloud Cavalry. Originally, these soldiers did not have any ill feelings towards the Mahist army. They even had some fear and dissatisfaction towards the battle with the Prince Ding mansion. At this time, under the lead of someone, many people quickly put down their weapons and left. Soon, many peoples to put down their weapons. And even protect them from the swords and swords. To protect them, to protect. In less than half an hour, the entire battlefield had quieted down. The number of soldiers who chose to throw down their weapons and surrender to Prince Ding's residence was as high as tens of thousands. Both Mu Yang's and Gao Ming's men were present. Mu Yang was still protected by a few loyal guards as he continued to resist the Mahist army. Gao Ming had already fallen into the hands of the Mahist army. The black-clothed general carried Gao Ming forward and said in a deep voice, "Stand down." The Black Cloud Cavalry soldiers that were originally surrounding Mu Yang immediately stopped and respectfully moved to the side. Mu Yang stared at the black-clothed man in front of him for a while. He finally said with a frown, "You are Qin Feng." Mu Yang and Qin Feng had only met a few times. However, Mu Yang still remembered the silent man who was said to be the commander of the Prince Ding mansion's most mysterious Qilin. Qin Feng nodded his head without a care. He casually threw Gao Ming at Mu Yang's feet. Gao Ming stood up with a dispirited expression. He looked at Qin Feng with some fear. He only felt that he was very unlucky. He had always been suppressed by Mu Yang. Now that Mu Yang was about to be unlucky, he was sent by the emperor to capture Mu Yang. However, he still ended up being captured by the Mahist army along with Mu Yang. At this moment, Gao Ming truly felt that Mu Yang was his nemesis. "You, the traitor of the Prince Ding mansion. How dare you? This general is a general of the Dechu state." Gao Ming looked at Qin Feng, who didn't care about him at all. He roared fiercely. The general beside Qin Feng twitched his mouth. He couldn't help but lower his head and cough lightly. "Commander Qin, is there something wrong with this guy? Was the status of a general of the Dechu state something to be proud of? Especially now that the two armies were fighting against each other, and they had already become prisoners." Qin Feng raised his eyebrows and smiled. "So what if he's a general of the Dechu state? Now that the two armies are facing each other, wouldn't the more generals of the Dechu state that I killed, the greater the merit?" Hearing this, Gao Ming's face instantly paled. He didn't dare to say anything else. Mu Yang stared at Qin Feng and frowned. "Princess Ding's methods are good?" It seems that Princess Ding had already predicted that this one and General Gao would meet here. "Please ask Princess Ding to come out and meet me," Qin Feng said indifferently. "The princess consort isn't here right now. I'm afraid that Marquis Mu Yang won't be able to do as he wishes." Mu Yang frowned. "I wonder if my humble wife was taken away by Commander Qin's men. She's just an innocent girl. As a general, Commander Qin probably wouldn't make things difficult for a weak girl who doesn't know anything." "Doesn't know anything?" Qin Feng's expression was a bit strange. Mu Yang nodded. "That's right. This one was defeated by Commander Qin. Even if I die, I have no regrets. However, my humble wife and servant have nothing to do with this matter. Please be magnanimous and let them go. Qin Feng looked at Mu Yang and shook his head, saying indifferently, what a pity. Actually, Mu Yang himself wasn't a hateful person. If Marquis Mu Yang's mansion didn't offend Prince Ding, he wouldn't be so unlucky. Even at this point, he still didn't forget to plead for Yaoji. He could be considered loyal. Unfortunately, they all served their own masters and stood on different sides. However, Mu Yang had to die. Commander Qin. Mu Yang's expression changed slightly. Qin Feng said casually, of course I won't hurt Yaoji and Mu Lai. Because... Mu Yang stared at Qin Feng, not knowing what he wanted to say. Suddenly, he felt a cold pain in his abdomen. He looked down in astonishment and saw Mu Lai's big smiling eyes in his arms. There was actually an obedient and innocent smile. Mu Lai said with a grin, because I'm a member of the Prince Ding mansion. Chapter 975. This sudden turn of events stunned everyone. While Mu Yang was in a daze, Mu Lai, who was originally sitting in his arms, flew up and pounced towards Qin Feng. But because everyone was shocked by this sudden change, none of the guards beside Mu Yang actually stopped him, allowing him to fall to Qin Feng's side. After being father and son for a few years, Mu Yang realized that he didn't understand his son at all. At least, he didn't know that he had such good qigong. Mu Lai stood beside Qin Feng and smiled as he waved the dagger in his hand. Godfather, how is it? Qin Feng patted Mu Lai's head with praise, causing Mu Lai to smile happily. Qin Feng's praise wasn't just the praise of a father to his son, but more importantly, it was the praise of a Qi Lin commander to a future member. Mu Lai, who had made it his life's goal to become the youngest official member of Qi Lin, was naturally very happy. Mu Yang painfully covered his abdomen, which was bleeding profusely, and bent over on the horse's back. He looked in disbelief at his son, who was very familiar yet strangely unfamiliar. Lai, you, Mu Lai looked at Mu Yang and sighed helplessly. He said faintly, do you still not understand? I'm not your son. What? Mu Yang shook his head absent-mindedly. He felt that everything in front of him was ridiculous. He even thought that he was hallucinating because he was too tired these days. After a while, he looked up at Mu Lai and said, you're not Lai, then who are you? What did you do to Lai, Mu Lai said, I am Mu Lai, but, your son's name isn't Mu Lai. Back then, you didn't even ask what Yaoji named the child. Mu Yang couldn't hold on any longer and finally fell from the horse's back. The guards beside him quickly supported him and glared angrily at Mu Lai, who was beside Qin Feng. Mu Lai shrugged innocently. Seeing Mu Yang's pale face due to pain and shock, Mu Lai couldn't bear it. Speaking of which, Mu Yang really didn't treat him badly all these years. Although he was secretly harmed by his wife a few times, who didn't have some shameful private matters in a noble family. Unfortunately, the house of Marquis Mu Yang had offended someone they shouldn't have. Back when they arrived in Chu capital, Prince Ding had already decided the end for the house of Marquis Mu Yang. The peaceful days of the past few years had already been earned. You're from Prince Ding Mansion. Mu Yang gritted his teeth and asked, where is my son? Mu Lai's Marquis Mu Yang's Marquis house of Marquis Mu Yang's Marquis. Could it be that Ding Wangfu is unwilling to let go of a newborn baby? Thinking of this possibility, Mu Yang's heart could not help but tremble. Perhaps his son was long dead, and the one he doted on all these years was just a spy planted by Princess Ding in the house of Marquis. If it wasn't me who stayed in the house of Marquis all these years, your son would have been killed by your wife. Mu Lai curled his lips and said discontentedly. If it was really Yaoji and a child who didn't know anything who returned to the house of Marquis, that child would have died many times over. Mu Lai was a little resentful towards Mu Yang's accusation. Mu Yang was stunned for a long time, then he suddenly laughed out loud. Looking at Mu Lai, he said, "Were you the one who leaked the defense and secrets of the battle with Lu Jingxian? The Prince Ding mansion is really something, even a child can." Mu Lai pursed his lips and smiled, but didn't answer him. The excessive blood loss made Mu Yang a little dizzy. Perhaps he also understood that he couldn't escape today, so he didn't force himself. Waving his hand, he broke free from his subordinate support and let himself fall to the ground. After resting for a moment, Mu Yang opened his eyes and asked, "How is Yaoji? Even if you're not her son, she's been good to you these years. You can't even." Mu Lai was a little embarrassed and didn't speak. In fact, he originally hoped that Mu Yang wouldn't ask this question. It would be less painful if he didn't know anything. It would also save Yaoji from dealing with the current situation. He didn't expect Mu Yang to still ask. Mu Lai looked up at Qin Feng, and Qin Feng looked at Mu Yang indifferently. A clear female voice came from behind the crowd, "Let me say it." The Mahist army stepped aside, and Yaoji strolled out from behind, looking at them indifferently. Mu Yang looked at Yaoji in front of him. She was dressed in white, and the white fox cloak made her look even fairer and more delicate. She was different from her usual glamorous self. Although she didn't wear the luxurious clothes of the House of Marquis, she looked more peaceful and elegant. Obviously, she didn't suffer much these days. Looking at the woman in front of him, Mu Yang finally squeezed out a bitter smile. Seeing the situation in front of him, what else didn't he understand? Why? Yaoji. Cough, why did you do this? Mu Yang looked at the woman in front of him in pain, as if Yaoji's appearance was more painful than the stab Mu Lai gave him just now. Yaoji looked at him indifferently and said, "Do you still remember the letter I left behind when I fled with the child?" Mu Yang was a little dazed. After a while, he remembered and nodded, "I remember. You said that you didn't want to see me or anyone from the House of Marquis Muyang again. But later, you came back with Lai, I thought." Yaoji's smile was a little bitter, "You never took my words seriously. I've understood it ever since I brought Lai back to this world. You still don't understand. I brought Lai back not because I thought it through, but because I am a spy of the Prince Ding mansion. You should have been on guard against me from the day I came back." Yaoji always believed that Mu Yang loved her very much. But Mu Yang never listened to her seriously, so Mu Yang never suspected her intention of suddenly bringing the child to the house of Marquis Muyang. He just thought that she had suffered enough outside with the child and naturally came back. You hate me so much," Mu Yang said miserably. Yaoji shook her head, "No, I don't hate you. I just don't love you anymore. The Prince Ding mansion and princess consort saved me and my child. Mu Yang, I just want my child to be safe and happy in this world. Even if I have to sacrifice you." Mu Yang spat out a mouthful of blood. Mu Yang raised his hand to stop the guard who wanted to help him up. He shook his head and smiled bitterly, "Yaoji. I never thought that the house of Marquis Muyang would be destroyed by you." Looking at the clear dark clouds in the sky, Mu Yang's eyes were distant and empty. He still remembered when he was a high-spirited teenager, riding a horse on a slanted bridge and dancing with red sleeves. When he rode past the Qinqing lane, he happened to see a beautiful woman with light makeup sitting lazily by the window, looking tired. From then on, he fell into the endless soft red and couldn't get up. But now, this woman was dressed in white and looked cold. She was no longer the beautiful dancer in the Qingqing lane who could dance in the capital. As for him, he was no longer the romantic and elegant young man he used to be. Chapter 976. Mu Yang suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed, as if he had never laughed so wantonly in his life. But the people who heard his laughter didn't have the slightest joy on their faces. Instead, there was a bit of sadness in their dignified expressions. Yaoji, come here. I have a few words to ask you. Mu Yang looked at Yaoji and said. Yaoji nodded and walked forward slowly. Mother, don't. Mu Lai cried anxiously. Yaoji. Qin Feng frowned. Mu Yang was already at the end of his rope. No one knew if he would drag Yaoji down with him. Yaoji looked back and smiled faintly. It's okay. Seeing her faint smile, Qin Feng's heart sank slightly. He frowned but didn't say anything to stop her. Yaoji walked to Mu Yang and squatted down. What do you want to ask? Mu Yang looked at her. You're really not afraid that I'll kill you? Although he was seriously injured now, it wasn't difficult to kill Yaoji at such a close distance. Yaoji looked indifferent and didn't say anything. Mu Yang smiled faintly and asked in a low voice, that child is in Glass City. He's fine. Yaoji said. Did the Prince Ding mansion take the child away? Mu Yang asked with a bit of hope. Maybe he still didn't believe that the woman in front of him would betray him. Maybe she had no choice but to do it for the child. Unfortunately, the cruelty of reality forced him to face it. Yaoji shook her head slightly. No, I asked to come. I don't hate you, but Marquis Muyang Mansion didn't let us go anywhere in the world. The only place I can go is the northwest, but it has enmity with Marquis Muyang Mansion. Prince Ding wanted to destroy Marquis Muyang Mansion and make the old Marquis suffer. As for me, I want my child to live peacefully under the protection of Ding Palace. It's that simple. Prince Ding. Mu Yang closed his eyes in pain. Originally, the Prince Ding Mansion and Marquis Muyang's mansion did not have any enmity, but that year, his father acted on the orders of the late emperor to attack Princess Ding, which brought a huge disaster to the Muyang Mansion. Over the years, Mo Jingqi was dead. More than half of the nobles in West Hill were killed or injured. Jinan Palace almost had no descendants. The king of the northern region, Ren Qining, was destroyed. Why was it that only the house of Marquis Muyang was spared? It turned out that Prince Ding had already started to deal with the house of Marquis Muyang. It was just that they didn't know about it. The glory of the house of Marquis Muyang that their father valued the most in his life would bear the infamy of being a traitor after their death. The house of Marquis Muyang would have no descendants from then on. Their children would wander about outside and they would never even see them. However, he treated a spy of unknown origin as his only son and doted on him for a few years. Prince Ding's revenge was truly ruthless. Father isn't dead yet, is he? Mu Yang recovered from his chaotic thoughts and grabbed Yaoji to ask. If Prince Ding had arranged all this to take revenge on the house of Marquis Muyang, then he would never have let his father die so early. Yaoji sighed slightly. Looking at Mu Yang's anxious eyes, she nodded gently. Marquis Muyang was indeed not dead yet, but Yaoji knew that no one could save him. His ending had long been decided. It would definitely not be more comfortable than Mu Yang's current situation. How could Mu Yang not understand what Yaoji understood? He was also a very smart person. After knowing so many things, it only took him a moment to connect all the dots. From the moment Yaoji and Mu Lai were taken away, it was a trap aimed at the house of Marquis Muyang and perhaps Mo Jingli. Prince Ding. Good move. In the end, Mu Yang could only smile bitterly. Yaoji. Qin Feng said in a low voice. They had caused quite a commotion here. If Zhao Lian's army found out and rushed over, there would be trouble. Yaoji nodded. She stood up and silently walked behind Qin Feng. Mu Yang's complicated gaze fell from Yaoji to Mu Lai, who was standing beside Qin Feng. In the end, he shook his head. Mu Yang will bear all the sins of the house of Marquis Mu Yang. I beg Prince Ding and Princess to spare my father's life. The people present did not respond. How could Prince Ding's decision be so easily overturned? The fact that Prince Ding could endure for so many years for the sake of tormenting the house of Marquis Mu Yang and did not kill the old Marquis Mu Yang back then was enough to explain the problem. Even if the princess personally pleaded for mercy, it might not be useful. Qin Feng said in a low voice, I will pass on your words to the prince. No one can influence the prince's decision. But Marquis Mu Yang will not die for the time being. The prince still wanted to see the old Marquis Mu Yang. Naturally, he would not let him die. Of course, if he committed suicide, it would be a different story. Mu Yang finally sighed and said, I was thinking too much. Yaoji, take care. Before his voice died away, Mu Yang's blurred eyes due to excessive blood loss suddenly opened. He pulled out the long sword of the guard beside him. A bloody light flashed. Mu Yang stared fixedly at the distance and gradually lost his luster. Yaoji closed her eyes and did not look at the man lying in a pool of blood behind her. She turned around and walked to the back. Mu Lai took a look at Qin Feng and also turned to follow her. Qin Feng glanced at the situation in front of him and ordered in a low voice, Go and bring Marquis Mu Yang out. Send Mu Yang's body to him. Even the iron-willed Black Cloud cavalry soldiers could not help but show a trace of pity when they saw this situation. They could only sigh in their hearts. The old Marquis Mu Yang was unlucky to provoke someone he should not provoke. On a quiet and deserted hillside, Yaoji sat alone on the hillside. She was lost in thought as she looked at the bleak scenery in the distance. Mu Lai came over and sat beside her in silence. After a long time, Yaoji smiled faintly, Why don't you go with them? Now that the war was fierce, Qin Feng and others could not stay here for too long. Mu Lai shook his head, Foster father said there is nothing for me to do. I will stay to protect you. Yaoji did not want to leave with the army. Qin Feng did not force her. He only left some people to protect her secretly. Mu Lai also stayed behind. The next thing would be the battle of swords and spears on the battlefield. No matter how short the Mahist army was, they would not let a child go to the battlefield. Looking at Yaoji's dejected Mu Yang, Mu Lai sighed, If you want to cry, then cry. I will not tell anyone. In fact, he also wanted to cry. He was an orphan since he was young. Although he was taken care of by the Prince Ding mansion and did not suffer any grievances, he was not as happy as a child who was loved by his parents. Mu Yang was his father for a few years. He was really good to him. No wonder the teacher who trained him said that the most important thing to be a spy was not martial arts or ability, but a heart as hard as iron. If he was like this, it was needless to say how sad Yaoji was. Yaoji smiled faintly, I have expected this ending a few years ago. What is there to cry about? Mu Lai looked at her and asked softly, Did you just want Mu Yang to kill you? Yaoji was silent, but Mu Lai knew he guessed right. He quickly grabbed Yaoji, Don't think too hard. Don't forget, you still have a son. You still have me. Don't I call you mother? Do you blame me for stabbing Mu Yang? Chapter 977. Yaoji shook her head and rubbed his little head. She said, Silly child, no matter what you do, it will be the same in the end. Don't worry about me. I still have to go back to Li City and watch you and your little brother grow up safely. Mu Lai finally relaxed and asked, will you bring little brother back? Yaoji shook her head. It is good as long as he grows up safely. Also, his adoptive parents have taken care of him for so many years. Why should I disturb him? What, you don't want to raise me in the future? Mu Lai hurriedly shook his head and said, how can that be? Don't worry. I will take care of you and adoptive father until you grow old. If you want to see little brother, I will bring him back for you. Looking at the child carefully looking at her, Yaoji's cold heart couldn't help but feel some warmth. She smiled faintly and leaned against Mu Lai to hum a little song. The gentle and moving tune added a bit of lingering desolation in the bleak cold spring. Yaoji looked at the setting sun in the distance and tears silently flowed down her face. In the Mahist army's camp, Lu Jingxian looked joyfully at the woman in white sitting next to him. He laughed loudly and said, everyone says that Qi Lin appears and disappears mysteriously. This general has seen the power of the Mahist army today. This general admires you. This time, Lu Jingxian had been able to break through the blockade of more than 100,000 soldiers with very few casualties. Qi Lin's contributions could not go unnoticed. If it wasn't for the shadow guard of the Prince Ding mansion delivering the news of the Chu army, Lu Jingxian would have been able to pass through, but he would have lost many soldiers. Not to mention, he had suddenly received news from the Wang Fei today, telling him to immediately attack the Chu army's western army camp. Originally, he had been worried. After all, the difference in numbers between the two armies was too great. It was not a good idea to attack them face to face. However, halfway through the battle, not only did Princess Ding bring reinforcements, but the Chu army also mysteriously ran away. After the soldiers returned to the camp, and hearing Wang Fei's explanation, he finally understood that in just a few short days, Wang Fei had set up such an interesting plan to cause internal strife in the Chu army. After hearing Lu Jingxian's words, Yili smiled bitterly and helplessly. I didn't come up with this idea. Mo Xiuyao's plan was to instigate internal strife in the Chu army, but it was more to deal with the house of Marquis Muyang. Therefore, this was prepared for the house of Marquis Muyang from the very beginning. Mo Jingli could only be said to be an innocent bystander. However, he naturally couldn't tell his subordinates about this. The fewer people who knew about Prince Ding's revenge, the better. Lu Jingxian said, right now, Yun Ting is holding back Mo Jingli's army at the Cold Valley Pass. I'm afraid we have to act quickly. Yun Ting only had a few 100,000 soldiers. The terrain outside the Cold Valley Pass was not very advantageous for the Mahist army. If Mo Jingli steeled his heart and gave up on the few 100,000 soldiers, Yun Ting would be in danger. Yili nodded and said, General's words are timely. Take advantage of the fact that something happened to the Western army and their morale is low. We have to quickly send troops to deal with this. However, Lei Tingfeng is also here. I'm afraid it won't be easy to deal with. Lu Jingxian said with a frown. If it was only Zhao Lian's 200,000 soldiers, the Mahist army would definitely win. However, Lei Tingfeng's Shilin army was also here. They could fight slowly, but they didn't have the time. Yili shook his head and said, Lei Tingfeng won't fight us here. Lei Zhenting didn't send Lei Tingfeng here to help Mo Jingli fight the Mahist army. Reporting to the Grand General, Wang Fei, Governor Qin has returned. Outside the tent, a guard reported. Lu Jingxian nodded and said, invite Commander Qin in. Qin Feng opened the curtain and came in. He said in a deep voice, greetings to Wang Fei and Great General. Yili looked at Qin Feng and asked, Mu Yang. Qin Feng said respectfully, Mu Yang has already committed suicide. The Chu army's General Gao Ming has surrendered. This subordinate has brought him back. Gao Ming. Yili frowned slightly. she didn't have any impression of this person. Behind her, Shuo Jing reported, he is Mo Jingli's old minister. He has been following Mo Jingli since he was princely. However, after Mo Jingli ascended the throne, he has been suppressed by Mu Yang and doesn't get along well with the house of Marquis Mu Yang. This time, I'm afraid he didn't stop adding insult to injury for the house of Marquis Mu Yang. Yili frowned slightly and said, lock him up first and bring him back for the prince to deal with. Lu Jingxian was moved and said, Princess, since this person is Mo Jingli's confidant, he should know not to reveal the Chu army secrets. Qin Feng said, Gao Ming has already expressed that as long as Princess spares his life, he is willing to tell us everything he knows. It's not difficult to spare his life. LV Jingxian nodded, but Wang Fei, this person can't be used. For traitors, people don't like them. Traitors were never liked, especially traitors like Gao Ming who liked to add insult to injury and his methods were clumsy. Yili nodded and said, General is right. Shuo Jing, you go and do it. Yes, this subordinate will take his leave. Shuo Jing said respectfully. Yaoji didn't come back. Yili looked behind Qin Feng and asked softly. Qin Feng nodded and said, she wanted to relax. This subordinate left a few people behind to protect her. Mu Lai is also with her. Yili nodded and said, let her be. This matter is already difficult for her. As a woman, she didn't want Yaoji to face such a thing. However, as a wife, she couldn't stop Mo Xiuyao from setting such a trap. Because in her heart, no matter how much she sympathized with Yaoji, it would never surpass her feelings for Mo Xiuyao. Needless to say, Mo Xiuyao's hatred for the house of Marquis Mu Yang was because of her. Even if she could forgive him, she would never forcefully erase Mo Xiuyao's hatred for them. She was no longer the soldier from her previous life who always looked at things from the standpoint of fairness and justice. She was the princess of the Ding Palace, Missouri Xiuyao's wife. Thank you, princess. Qin Feng said in a low voice. Chapter 978. In the Chu Army's West Army camp, Zhao Lian and Lei Tingfeng sat opposite each other with bitter smiles. Mu Yang and Gao Ming's troops were ambushed by the Mahist army at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the Chu army lost tens of thousands of troops. Now, the two finally understood that the events of the past few days were all part of the Prince Ding Mansion scheme. Because of this, they actually lost the most resourceful old Marquis Mu Yang and the most promising rising star of the Chu army. The Prince Ding Mansion's methods were truly frightening. Lei Tingfeng lowered his eyes and said, now that we have removed the Marquis Mu Yang, I'm afraid, the Mahist army's next target will be you and me. General Zhao, you must be extremely careful of Lu Jinxian's army. Lei Tingfeng knew that Lu Jinxian's army must be very anxious to meet up with Yun Ting on the other side. However, Lu Jingxian was not the only one who was in a hurry. Lei Tingfeng was also in a hurry. In the west, news came from his father Mo Xiuyao that the battle was not going well. Zhao Lian nodded solemnly and said, Lei Shizi is right. Although the confrontation with Lu Jingxian these past few days made Zhao Lian feel that his eyes were wide open, what made him very depressed was that his military strength was clearly above Lu Jingxian's, but he was still suppressed to the point that he could not display his full strength. Zhao Lian had to admit that there was a gap between him and Lu Jingxian. However, this was already the last line of defense before Lu Jingxian's army left Cold Valley Pass. No matter what, he had to stop them. Hearing that Zhao Lian wanted to use the tactic of delaying, Lei Tingfeng's eyes flashed and he did not say anything more. When he returned to his tent, a guard immediately delivered the battle report of the Shiling army. Although they were nearly 1,000 li away, the battle report of the Shiling army and the Mahist army was delivered to Lei Tingfeng without missing a single day. Looking at the secret letter in his hand, Lei Tingfeng sat down and pressed his tired forehead, asking, "Did father have any instructions?" Originally, he could have brought hundreds of thousands of Shieling army here in secret and easily set up a trap. However, the thing in Mo Jingli's hands was too important. He could only expose his military strength in exchange for that list. Compared to hundreds of thousands of soldiers, the Lord of Jinnan's mansion needed a hidden chess piece that could turn the situation around at a critical moment. The guard said in a deep voice, "The prince said that prince did not do anything wrong. However, we still need to retreat. We must withdraw from the current stalemate as soon as possible. The battle in the west is not good for Shieling. The prince suspects that Mo Xiaoyao sent an army of nearly 200,000 people to go around our back. Prince, please rush to Yuming Pass, which is 300 li west of Hanga Pass, within half a month to stop this army." Lei Tingfeng was stunned and said in a deep voice, 200,000 people? How can the Mahist army have so many people? The total strength of the Mahist army was less than 1,000,000. Previously, they had wiped out millions of troops, so the Mahist army should have lost at least 200,000 people. Even if the Mahist army did not lose a single soldier, and with the troops stationed in various places, it was impossible for the Mahist army to send another 200,000 people to attack the Shieling army from the rear. The guard said, "Prince, you forgot that the Prince Ding Mansion's military service system is different from other countries. According to the prince's estimation, if Prince Ding is willing, he can at most mobilize 1,000,000 well-trained soldiers within a month, and another 2,000,000 recruits within 3 months. Currently, the Prince Ding Mansion's area of control could be said to be the top of all countries. They had just defeated the northern tribes, and the morale of the Prince Ding Mansion was high. If Prince Ding wanted to recruit soldiers, it could not be easier." Lei Tingfeng could not help but gasp. The most reassuring thing about the Mahist army was its military strength. The Mahist army's military strength had never been large, but they had forgotten to take into account the resources of the Prince Ding Mansion and the rallying power of the Mahist army. Once Mo Xiaoyao wanted to expand his military strength, he would have an endless supply of soldiers to replenish it. "The prince also has a message for you," the guard said respectfully. Lei Tingfeng looked at him. The guard said in a low voice, "The prince said that you don't have to worry too much about Mo Jingli. He can't win against Princess Ding. Prince, please leave as soon as possible." Lei Tingfeng was stunned for a moment. Only then did he understand his father's intentions. His father had never intended to work with Mo Jingli. From the beginning, his father had never thought highly of Mo Jingli. The reason why he had made such an arrangement and formed an alliance with Mo Jingli was to use Mo Jingli to restrain Yi Li. After all, one Mo Xiaoyao was already very difficult to deal with. If Yi Li was added to the mix, even the Jinan Palace might not be able to handle it. Once his goal was achieved, Mo Jingli would be useless. Whether Mo Jingli won or lost, it didn't matter to the Jinan Palace. If Jinan Palace won against the Prince Ding Mansion, then it would be best if Mo Jingli lost. After that, Jinan Palace would be the biggest winner. If Jinan Palace lost, then Mo Jingli couldn't be left alive. He would become a huge threat to Jinan Palace. After thinking for a moment, Lei Tingfeng raised his head and said, "I understand. Go back and report to my father. I will leave this battlefield as soon as possible. Tell my father to take care of himself." The guard nodded and respectfully left. "Your subordinate will take his leave." In the tent, Lei Tingfeng was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Come." A man who looked like a guard appeared at the door. "Crown Prince. Send a letter to Princess Ding for me. I want to talk to her," Lei Tingfeng said. A trace of surprise flashed through the guard's eyes, but he still replied respectfully, "Your subordinate obeys." About 10 miles away from the camps of the two armies, Yi Li was sitting by a small stream. She was leisurely watching the stream flow by. Her expression was calm. On the grass by the stream, new green shoots had sprouted from the withered yellow weeds. It added a trace of warmth and hope to the desolate scene. Qin Feng and Zhuo Jing stood side by side not far behind Yili. They were both thinking about their own matters. Suddenly, Qin Feng and Zhuo Jing looked at the forest behind them. Qin Feng said, "Crown Prince Lei, since you're here, why don't you come out and meet us? Princess Ding's side is indeed filled with experts. I am impressed." Lei Tingfeng walked out of the forest and said with a smile. Yili stood up. She turned around and said with a smile, "Crown Prince Lei is also a rare expert. Unlike Yili, who doesn't have any skills and can only bring a few people with her to avoid any accidents." Lei Tingfeng's mouth twitched. If this woman in front of him didn't have any skills, then there weren't many people in the world who could. At the same time, Lei Tingfeng was also surprised by Yili's caution. Lei Tingfeng rarely fought and there were not many people in the world who understood the depth of his skills. But Yili did not forget that he had a father who was one of the top 4 experts in the world. Lei Tingfeng's talent was not bad. As long as there were no accidents, Lei Tingfeng's martial arts would not be bad. Wang Fei is joking. When encountering Wang Fei, it is always other people who have accidents, Lei Tingfeng said with a faint smile. Yili did not care about his hidden mockery. She smiled faintly and said, "Now that the 2 armies are at war, Crown Prince Lei has privately requested to see Yili. Is it to mock Yili?" Lei Tingfeng smiled faintly and said, "Wang Fei is straightforward. This Shitzi will not be long-winded. This one knows that Wang Fei is in a hurry to go to Cold Valley Pass to meet with General Yunting, right?" Yili nodded slightly. Some things on the battlefield could be hidden, but some things could not be hidden from others. At least, the current movements of the Mahist army could not be hidden from people like Lei Tingfeng. Chapter 979. If this one and General Zhao work together, is Princess confident that we can reach Cold Valley Pass in half a month? Lei Tingfeng asked. No. Yili said frankly. Ending a battle quickly required the right time, place, and people. Most of the time, it was indispensable. Not every battle could be controlled. Otherwise, a battle would not have lasted for 3 to 5 years. Although they did not have the advantage in terms of military strength, both Yili and Lu Jingxian were confident that they could defeat Zhao Lian and Lei Tingfeng. But the problem was, it would take a long time. Lei Tingfeng was slightly surprised by Yili's honesty. However, he soon understood that Yili also knew the reason for his visit. Otherwise, she would not be so direct. He smiled bitterly and helplessly. "It seems that I can't hide it from Princess. This one plans to withdraw the army and leave immediately. Princess, please make things convenient for me." Yili smiled. Making things convenient for others is also making things convenient for yourself. Lord Lei, please do as you wish. Lei Tingfeng looked at Yili suspiciously. Does Princess know why this one is withdrawing the army? Yili smiled faintly. Isn't it to protect Genom of Gojoseon's flank? Since Princess knows, if you leave, won't you ruin Prince Ding's plan? Even after so many years, Lei Tingfeng still felt that he could not understand this woman. But after experiencing so much and hearing so much about her, Lei Tingfeng could not help but be cautious. Yili looked at the stream in front of her and calmly said, "If I let Lord Lei pass, Prince Ding's plan will only be ruined. Also, Lord Lei may not be able to stop him, right? But if this consort does not let Lord Lei pass, Yunting's hundreds of thousands of soldiers will immediately suffer. How can this consort not know what is important and what is not?" Lei Tingfeng was stunned. He finally cupped his hands towards Yili and said, "Since this is the case, many thanks for Princess's help. This one will take his leave. Take care. I won't see you out." Yili nodded. Watching Lei Tingfeng's figure disappear into the woods, Yili said in a low voice, "Princess, the West Hill has played Mo Jingli like this." Yili smiled and said, "From the beginning, Lei Jinting did not take Mo Jingli seriously. Mo Jingli and Lei Jinting were not equal in terms of ability. How could he ask Lei Jinting to treat Mo Jingli as a partner? From start to finish, Mo Jingli was just a tool in Lei Jinting's hands. Once Lei Tingfeng retreats and Mo Jingli loses Mu Jingmin and Mu Yang, I'm afraid they won't be able to hold on much longer," Zhuo Jing said. Qin Feng frowned and said, "Even so, Mo Jingli's military strength is still above ours. It's impossible for us to go back to help the prince in the near future." Yili smiled faintly and said, "That depends on how long Mo Jingli can hold on." Qin Feng and Zhuo Jing both remembered that when they went to Nanjing, they had made arrangements. It was really hard to say how long Mo Jingli could hold on. Lei Tingfeng left quickly and hurriedly, showing no mercy. By the time Zhao Lian and LV Jingxian returned from their battle, the barracks had long since been deserted. Zhao Lian had no choice but to order someone to quickly report the matter to Mo Jingli. When the news reached Mo Jingli's camp, Mo Jingli was also furious. There was no other reason. Marquis Muyang, who was imprisoned in the army, had mysteriously disappeared. In the past few days, Mo Jingli's anger had been rising sharply. All the officers and soldiers in the camp kept quiet out of fear. They were very careful, fearing that they would provoke the emperor's wrath if they were careless. Mo Jingli deeply felt that this expedition could be said to be not going well from the beginning to the end. And these few days, he was in a terrible fix and had his hands full. First, he suspected that the house of Marquis Muyang had betrayed him and sided with the Prince Ding mansion. Before the truth came to light, Muyang dared to kill his guards. When he sent Gao Ming to capture Muyang, unexpectedly, Muyang and Gao Ming fell into the hands of the Mahist army, and Muyang committed suicide. In this way, he, who suspected that the house of Marquis Muyang had sided with the Prince Ding mansion, was like a silly clown in the eyes of outsiders, being played by the Prince Ding mansion. Just as Mo Jingli was considering whether he should release Marquis Muyang to appease him or just kill him to prevent future troubles, news of Marquis Muyang's mysterious disappearance came from the camp. Mo Jingli did not even have time to vent his anger before Zhao Lian's prompt report made Mo Jingli spit out a mouthful of blood. A few months ago, Yi Ying's wound was not light, and she had not fully recovered. In the past few days, Mo Jingli's anger had been rising. Now, he was so angry that he finally vomited blood. "Your Majesty!" The generals below were shocked and they saw the situation. She just didn't know what was written in the memorial to make the emperor so angry. Mo Jingli waved away the hand of the eunuch who came forward to help him. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and sneered, "Lei Tingfeng. Pass down my decree. Order the general of the right wing to lead the troops to intercept Lei Tingfeng's troops. Be sure to catch them all in one fell swoop." "Your Majesty!" The generals could not help but exclaim. The reason why they had the confidence to go north was because of their alliance with West Hill. Now, they had not achieved anything in the confrontation with the Mahist army, but they had already started fighting with their own allies. It was obvious what kind of ending awaited them. "Your Majesty, please reconsider." A general standing at the front stepped forward and said, "Our army is now in a confrontation with the Mahist army. If we clash with the Shiling army again, I'm afraid that the Prince Ding mansion will benefit from it. In my opinion, the most important thing for our army now is to eliminate the hundreds of thousands of Mahist army led by Yunting outside the Cold Valley Pass. At that time, even if Princess Ding and Lu Jinxian's army reach the Cold Valley Pass, they will be surrounded by our army." The Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon of West Hill suddenly broke the agreement, which indeed surprised and angered everyone. But not everyone was like Mo Jingli, who was so angry that he did not care about anything else. Now, even if Leitingfing left with his troops and left them to face the Mahist army alone, they would not necessarily lose. But if your majesty were to fight with the crown prince of Genom of Gojoseon, then they would definitely lose. Lu Jingxian was not so kind as to wait for their internal conflict to end before starting a fight. Mo Jingli was silent for a while, then finally snorted and listened to his subordinate's suggestion. How could Mo Jingli not know that there were no benefits to fighting with Leitingfing at this time? But he had just been viciously swindled by King Ding's residence, and now he was swindled by the king of Jinnan's residence. Mo Jingli could not swallow this anger. After a long time, Mo Jingli said in a deep voice, "Gather all the troops. Within 3 days, I want to see Yunting's head." With nowhere to vent his anger, Mo Jingli could only take it out on Yunting, who was stationed outside the pass. Understood. The generals below all quietly let out a sigh of relief. Compared to Leitingfing, Yunting was naturally easier to deal with. And no matter from the current situation or the current battle situation, Yunting was their first target to eliminate. After dismissing everyone, Mo Jingli was alone in the silent tent. The expression on his face became more and more unsightly. Too many things had happened in the past few days. Now that he had come back to his senses, he finally understood that the so-called betrayal of the house of Marquis Muyang was a scheme by the Prince Ding mansion. And because of this, he lost 2 of his most capable subordinates. Presumably, Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li were secretly laughing at him right now. Chapter 980. Bam! Mo Jingli waved his hand, and all the decorations on the table fell to the ground. None of the servants in the tent dared to clean it up. They just cowered and knelt on the ground, not daring to move. Mo Xiaoyao. Yi Li. I will never let you go. Mo Jingli's voice was cold and sinister as if it came from hell. Marquis Muyang woke up from his sleep. The scene in front of him dazed him for a moment. This was obviously not the prison cell he was in the Chu army camp. It was a gloomy dungeon. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. Did the emperor move him here because he was worried that someone would come to rescue him? That was too much of a concern. He had given the power of the Marquis Muyang residence to Muyang. Who would come to rescue him? He had slept for too long, and his body was a little stiff. Marquis Muyang moved his body and sat up. But he was stunned when he saw the person not far away. In an instant, Marquis Muyang's face turned pale. His old and slightly drooping lips kept trembling. He stared blankly at the person outside the cell not far away. To be precise, it was a corpse. Muyang's lifeless eyes were wide open. The blood on his abdomen had already turned dark. There was also a hideous scar on his neck. It was clear that he had already lost his life. Yang Marquis Muyang cried out in alarm. His old body rushed to the side of the cell at a speed that didn't match his physical condition. Unfortunately, he was blocked by the cell's iron bars. He couldn't touch the person lying there quietly. Marquis Muyang burst into tears. Yang Who killed you? In the empty cell, only his mournful voice echoed. Marquis Muyang fell powerlessly to the side of the cell. He stared blankly at his son's corpse. In a moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Muyang was his only son and his only hope. After losing Muyang, it was as if everything in the world had lost its meaning. The Marquis Muyang residence is finished. His whole life, he was obsessed with fame and fortune. He only hoped that the house of Marquis Muyang would flourish in his hands. But now, the house of Marquis Muyang was destroyed in his own hands. His only son had died in front of him. Was he really wrong? Why? Why don't you just take my life? Why did you kill my son? Your Majesty! Your Majesty! Marquis Muyang's residence is so loyal. The Emperor Marquis Muyang called. Mo Jingli or Mo Jingqi. A slightly cold voice sounded from the outside, and the originally closed door of the dungeon was pushed open from the outside with a creak. A handsome man dressed in black walked in. Qin Feng. Did you kill Yang He? Marquis Muyang was shocked. He originally thought that Muyang was captured by Mo Jingli, but it turned out that he had unknowingly fallen into the hands of the Prince Ding mansion. That's right. He recalled that he had suddenly fainted before he woke up. If it was Mo Jingli, there was no need for him to do so. Qin Feng did not deny it. He said calmly, since Marquis Muyang understands, you should also know why you ended up like this, right? Qin Feng might feel a little emotional about Muyang's death, but as for Marquis Muyang's fate, Qin Feng did not have the slightest opinion. The Mahist army valued loyalty the most. Before Mo Jingli had fallen ill and died, Marquis Muyang had already been in cahoots with Mo Jingli. Back then, Marquis Muyang almost caused the princess consort and the little heir to die tragically, which was a great hatred of the Prince Ding mansion. Perhaps from Marquis Muyang's standpoint, he was just following orders. But from the standpoint of the Prince Ding mansion, especially from the perspective of Mo Xiaoyao, Prince Ding, this was a crime deserving of death. Perhaps this had nothing to do with right or wrong. The strong had the right to punish their enemies. Marquis Muyang could not help but tremble. He closed his eyes in pain. After seeing the people of the Prince Ding mansion, how could they not understand? He had been careful all his life. In the eyes of outsiders, he was a person who fawned over the powerful and lacked the backbone of a general. That was why, after King Ding's residence had declined, he wholeheartedly sought refuge with Mo Jingqi. He was not like Marquis Nan who did not care about politics, nor was he like the Hua family who secretly helped King Ding's residence. He would do whatever the emperor wanted him to do. Wasn't he a subject? As a subject, it was natural for him to obey the emperor's orders, even if it was wrong. But the one wrong thing he had done in his life was to lead the troops to besiege Princess Ding. Because of this, he had cut off Marquis Muyang's escape route. So when he saw that Mo Jingli was about to die, he could only immediately seek refuge with Mo Jingli. He could not seek refuge with the Prince Ding mansion like Marquis Nan and the Ling family, nor did he have the courage to bet the entire Hua family to live and die with the Dechu state like Duke Hua. He wanted to live and hold power in his hands. He wanted the Marquis Muyang mansion to be passed down from generation to generation. But now, all these years of struggle and hard work were in vain. Prince Ding Mansion. Prince Ding Mansion, why? I was only following orders. Marquis Muyang roared. He was unwilling to accept this. Back then, if he had a choice, would he have overestimated himself and become enemies with the Prince Ding mansion? Perhaps, occasionally, he had a thought. If the Prince Ding mansion was completely destroyed, would the Marquis Muyang mansion replace it? But that was just a thought. Qin Feng said calmly, when we came out, the prince asked me to pass a message to Marquis Muyang. Marquis Muyang looked at him. Qin Feng continued, the prince said, the pain I experienced will be repaid 100-fold. Back then, the prince spared Muyang's life. Now, he's taking it back. Marquis Muyang was silent. Back then, after that incident, Mo Xiaoyao still let Muyang go. Marquis Muyang had once felt lucky. So, Mo Xiaoyao only felt that the blow to him was not enough. Chapter 981. Looking at Marquis Muyang's lifeless appearance, Qin Feng lowered his eyes and said, I'll take Muyang away. Marquis Muyang should still have some time to think about it. With that, Qin Feng clapped his hands. 2 guards came in and carried Muyang's body away. Wait! Marquis Muyang shouted anxiously, where are you taking Yang? Qin Feng frowned slightly. Princess Consort gave the order to bury Muyang. The original Lord Ai's order was not like this. But since the big thing was done, the prince would not mind a small change. Seeing that Marquis Muyang did not react, Qin Feng turned and left. Why? How did you do it? Marquis Muyang's old and weak voice came from behind, the spy of the Muyang residence. Who is it? Qin Feng turned back in surprise. He did not expect Marquis Muyang to still have the mind to care about this question. Yaoji. Qin Feng said lightly. Marquis Muyang was stunned. He did suspect Yaoji, but he dismissed the idea in the end. The most fundamental reason was still Mu Lai. A woman, no matter how much she hated a man, she would not bring her son to harm her son's biological father. As if understanding Marquis Muyang's doubts, Qin Feng said, Mu Lai is not Muyang's son. What? Marquis Muyang was stunned again. That woman's son. I see. Knowing that he misunderstood, Qin Feng did not intend to explain. He glanced at Marquis Muyang and turned to leave. The moment he closed the door, a burst of crazy laughter came from inside. But that laughter sounded more like crying to Qin Feng's ears. Sighing softly, Qin Feng shook his head and walked out. 1,000 miles away, Mo Xiaoyao was sitting behind the desk in a daze with a gloomy expression in the tent. Feng Zhiyao came in and saw him. He raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? It hasn't even been a month and you're already missing Princess Consort. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at him. How can a loner understand the thoughts of someone with a family? Feng Zhiyao rolled his eyes in annoyance. He was a loner. Who did this to him? He had not stopped for a moment in the past few years. He waved the secret letter in his hand and threw it over, a letter from Qin Feng. It seems like Princess Consort doesn't miss you. She didn't even send you a greeting letter. Mo Xiaoyao raised his hand to catch it and lightly spat out, scram. Opening the envelope, the contents of the letter made Mo Xiaoyao's gloominess dissipate. He crumbled the letter, crumpled it into powder. Having known Mo Xiaoyao for many years, Feng Zhiyao naturally understood Mo Xiaoyao's expression. He asked curiously, what good news has made you so happy? Mo Xiaoyao's mood was clearly different from when he first came in. It was clear that Qin Feng's secret letter had reported something good. Princess Consort and General Liu have already taken care of Mo Jingli and are preparing to come back. That's not possible. As long as Mo Jingli wasn't a pig brain, it was impossible for him to be defeated so quickly. Mo Xiaoyao said, Mu Yang is dead. What kind of good news is that? Feng Zhiyao rolled his eyes. Mu Yang may be considered a rising star among the generals of Dechu state, but he probably did not have the qualifications for Prince Ding, Mo Xiaoyao, to place such importance on him. Mu Yang's death, was it worth Missouri Xiaoyao's joy? Feeling that something was wrong, Feng Zhiyao pondered for a moment before reacting. His expression changed slightly. Marquis Muyang's residence is finished. There weren't many people who knew how much Mo Xiaoyao hated Marquis Muyang, but Feng Zhiyao was definitely one of them. In these years, Mo Jingqi died. Ren Qining died. Helianjin also died. It should be Marquis Muyang's turn. However, Mu Yang's death was somewhat unjust. Back in the capital, Feng Zhiyao and Mu Yang were friends. He could only secretly feel pity for him. Mo Xiaoyao nodded slightly. Feng Zhiyao thought for a moment, then said, Old Marquis Muyang was one of the few people under Mo Jingli with brains. Marquis Muyang's residence is finished. Mo Jingli probably won't be able to hold on for much longer. In this way, after the princess is done, she can lead her troops to the west and surround the Shilling army with us. Lowering his head and calculating, Feng Zhiyao was also somewhat happy. If that was the case, perhaps the war would be over by the end of this year. Mo Xiuyao said indifferently, not necessarily. Mo Jingli's troops are far above Lu Jinqian's. Moreover, there's still Leitingfeng. Leitingfeng has already left the Chu army and returned to defend Yuming Pass. By the time Princess Li and the others finish off Mo Jingli, I'm afraid Yuming Pass will already be surrounded by Leitingfeng. Feng Zhiyao couldn't help but frown, and asked doubtfully, didn't you send He Su to Yuming Pass? Mo Xiuyao smiled at him, who told you He Su brought people to Yuming Pass? Then may I ask, Prince? Feng Zhiyao gritted his teeth, where did He Su bring 200,000 troops to? It was no wonder that Feng Zhiyao was angry. The Mahist army's strength was originally smaller than West Hill's. When they were fighting fiercely with Enchanting, Mo Xiuyao actually transferred 200,000 troops away. If he really wanted to go around Enchanting's flank, then so be it. But now, Mo Xiuyao actually told him that he didn't go at all. Did Prince Ding think that fighting a war was a game? Or were these generals really too stupid, unable to understand Prince Ding's unfathomable thoughts? Seeing Feng Zhiyao's flustered and exasperated appearance, Mo Xiuyao was in a good mood. Yuming Pass is more than 1,000 li away from us, and the road is difficult to travel. It's less than 300 li away from the Cold Valley Pass where Leitingfeng is, and it's all flat official roads. Even if He Su left before Leitingfeng, Feng San, how do you want He Su to get to Yuming Pass before Leitingfeng? Do you think that with Leitingfeng's intelligence, he would leave such a loophole for us? From the very beginning, he sent Leitingfeng to Mo Jingli's side precisely to guard against this. Feng Zhiyao was stunned. He forced himself to calm down, asking, in other words, Prince, you didn't plan to go to Yuming Pass from the very beginning? Mo Xiuyao shrugged, saying with a smile, why force yourself when you know it's impossible? Then where is He Su? Feng Zhiyao only felt the veins on his forehead throbbing. Mo Xiuyao said with a smile, if he's not at Yuming Pass, then he's naturally somewhere else. Feng Zhiyao turned his head to look at the map hanging on the wall, hesitating for a moment before asking, Cold Valley Pass. Mo Xiuyao smiled but didn't say anything. Feng Zhiyao could only look at the sky, speechless. He looked silently at Mo Xiuyao for a moment and swallowed the words he wanted to say. He sighed and said, with Wang Fei and General Lu holding them back, Leitingfeng may not be able to get back to Yuming Pass so quickly. Mo Xiuyao said, even so, the two armies will arrive at about the same time. Also, at that time, Yunting's army will probably be completely wiped out. Lu Jingxian and Li may also be surrounded by Mo Jingli alone. Feng Zhiyao nodded, accepting Mo Xiuyao's words. In any case, even 10 of him wouldn't be a match for Mo Xiuyao. In other words, we still have to fight head-on with Enchanting. Chapter 982. Mo Xiuyao said with a smile, isn't this interesting? After Enchanting, I don't have any opponents. Also, Feng San, don't you think that things have been too smooth for us these past 2 years? Feng Zhiyao was silent. In the past 2 years, the Mahist army seemed to have the help of the gods. It had been too smooth. It had been so smooth that he almost forgot that there was no such thing as smooth sailing on the battlefield. Moreover, Leitingfeng was a rare genius in the art of war. It was simply impossible to end the battle as quickly as before. Mo Xiuyao patted his shoulder and said with a smile, don't worry, we will win. It's just a matter of time. Feng Zhiyao nodded and said with a smile, of course. If you can't win against Enchanting, you will be laughed at. There was a little kid sitting behind him who wanted to laugh at someone. Mo Xiuyao glanced at him indifferently. Not everyone can laugh at this prince's joke. On the battlefield outside Cold Valley Pass, the original situation was that the Chu army had an overwhelming advantage. No matter how brave the Mahist army was, it was still difficult for them to turn the situation around when facing an army that was several times their size. It was a pity that Mo Jingli didn't have time to be proud. A new black army appeared on the battlefield and created another black wave. Upon seeing the reinforcements, the Mo family soldiers who were already exhausted to the point of exhaustion immediately charged back with renewed vigor. The Chu army's victory was slowly pushed back. The two armies began to fight fiercely. Cold Valley Pass. Seeing the situation in front of him, Mo Jingli's face was as black as ink. The general standing beside him didn't have the same arrogance as before. He didn't dare to anger Mo Jingli anymore. Who is that? Mo Jingli stared at the brave general in black on the battlefield and asked in a low voice. The general at the side took a closer look and pondered for a moment before reporting, "Your Majesty, that should be the newly promoted general of the Mo clan army, Hisu." Hisu. Mo Jingli frowned and thought about this unfamiliar name. Hisu was originally a normal soldier under Murongshin. In less than 8 years, he rose from a normal soldier to the position of a commander. After the northern tribes and the northern army invaded, he didn't listen to orders to move south. Instead, he gathered nearly 200,000 defeated soldiers and went to Chu Changxing's flank and blocked many of the northern army. After that, he joined the Prince Ding mansion and gained the trust of Princess Ding. However, there is news that Hisu was originally one of Princess Ding's men. The person next to him hurriedly reported what he knew. Hisu joined Murongshin's army not long after Princess Ding was at Shattered Snow Pass. Also, it is said that the princess consort of the Prince Ding mansion had 4 shadow guards. Later, Princess Ding removed the position of the shadow guard. However, only Zhou Jing, Lin Han, and Wei Lin knew of them. So, Hisu is a chess piece that Yili buried into Chu State more than 10 years ago. Mo Jingli said in a low voice. The general next to him didn't dare to say anything in front of the angry Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli glanced at the battlefield below. With the sudden addition of 200,000 fresh troops, the Mahist army became more and more courageous. On the other hand, the Chu army, who had already fought a great battle, gradually showed signs of decline. With a cold snort, Mo Jingli turned and left in a huff, leaving the generals looking at each other. Generally, this. Mo Jingli didn't care, but it made things difficult for the people present. They didn't know whether the emperor meant to continue fighting or to withdraw the troops. Withdraw the troops. General Li, who had the highest rank, sighed helplessly. It looked like they wouldn't be able to gain any advantage in this battle. What else could they do but withdraw the troops? Outside Cold Valley Pass, Yun Ting, who had been fighting bravely, fell to the ground as he watched the Chu army gradually retreat into the pass. He didn't care about the many corpses on the ground and directly lay down. Raising his eyes and seeing Hisu walk over, Yun Ting forced out a smile and said, "Brother, thank you. I thought I was done for." As he spoke, his eyelids started to droop. In these 2 days, Yun Ting had been very tired. This was the first time he had truly led an army by himself, and the pressure was great. However, Mo Jingli didn't know what medicine he had taken. He didn't care that his rear was empty and desperately gathered the nearby troops to attack him. Over the past few days, Yun Ting could only remember 2 meals of porridge, and the rest of his memory was filled with battles. If Hisu had come an hour later, Yun Ting wasn't sure if he would have been able to hold on. Hisu didn't care about the mess on the ground. He casually sat down and asked, "Wang Fei ordered you to defend this place to the death?" Yun Ting dazedly shook his head. Hisu raised his eyebrows and said, "Then why are you defending?" If I didn't come, and Wang Fei and General Lu didn't have time to arrive, you would have died because of your stupidity. This place wasn't some military stronghold. The stronghold was at Mo Jingli's side. If he couldn't win, retreating 20 or 30 li wouldn't make any difference. It's my first time leading an army. How can I lose my first time? I won't retreat even if I die. Muttering, Yunting's head tilted and he finally fell asleep. The soldiers who were cleaning up the battlefield came over. Seeing Yunting lying on the ground like a corpse, they looked at Hisu with some difficulty. General. Hisu stood up and patted the dust off his body. He waved his hand and smiled. It's nothing, General Yun is too tired. Carry him back to rest. Yes. 2 soldiers, one lifting his body and one lifting his leg, carried Yunting back to the camp. In the meantime, Yunting's mouth twitched and he slept very soundly. Not far from Cold Valley Pass, Lu Jingxian's army had also just experienced a great battle. However, Lu Jingxian and Yi Li were much more at ease than Yunting. Looking at the secret letter that had just been sent from Cold Valley Pass, Lu Jingxian couldn't help but laugh. No wonder Wang Fei isn't worried. She already knew that Prince had sent reinforcements. Yunting, this kid, really needs to be taught a lesson. Yi Li said with a faint smile. Just now, he was leading an army alone. It's inevitable that he would be nervous. General doesn't need to be too harsh on him. It must have been hard for him to last so many days. Lu Jingxian nodded. Actually, he was very satisfied with this new disciple. The reason he said he needed to teach him a lesson was mostly for Yi Li to hear. Hearing Yi Li's tone, it didn't seem like she was going to punish Yunting. Lu Jingxian also relaxed. Putting aside the matter of Yunting, Lu Jingxian said in a low voice, as long as there's another battle, Zhao Lian won't be able to hold on. At that time, we can directly take Cold Valley Pass and attack the Chu army with Yunting and Hisu. Yi Li nodded and said, Great General is right. However, even so, Mo Jingli should still have around 500,000 soldiers. This doesn't include the reinforcements that will come later. It won't be easy to deal with him in a short period of time. Lu Jingxian said with a smile, Wang Fei doesn't need to worry. As long as we can control the overall situation, we don't need to care about how many soldiers Mo Jingli has. Previously, we let him take the initiative. Now that we have taken back the initiative, we don't need to be afraid of him even if he has 1,000,000 soldiers. Moreover, when they met up with Yunting, their total military strength would be around 500,000. There was no need to worry about Mo Jingli. Chapter 983. Yi Li smiled apologetically. I was too impatient. She actually didn't have much experience in real battles. The few times she had fought, she had ended the battle quickly. Lu Jingxian's current plan was to slowly grind away at Mo Jingli. This made Yi Li, who was used to winning in one strike, feel slightly uncomfortable. However, she quickly understood her problem and tried her best to adjust. Lu Jingxian smiled. Wang Fei is too serious. If we use all our strength to severely injure Mo Jingli, it is possible. But if we want to achieve the same result as we did in Huifeng Valley, it will be very difficult. If we let the remnants of the Chu army escape, I'm afraid that they will come back soon. Rather than this, it was better to take things slowly. They would fight until Mo Jingli couldn't fight anymore. Yi Li nodded. I understand. Thank you, General, for your reminder. Lu Jingxian quickly said that he didn't dare. Yi Li had a smile on her lips. But in her heart, she started to think that it was time to use the chess pieces she had set up in Nanjing. Lu Jingxian was right. Rather than rushing for quick success and giving Mo Jingli a chance to come back, it was better to put in some effort and finish the battle in one go. In the Chu army's tent, Mo Jingli, who was reading through reports, suddenly shivered. A trace of confusion flashed across his dark face. He pulled at the bright yellow cloak on his body. 2 days later, the Maoist army and the Chu army's Western army had another decisive battle. The Chu army finally couldn't hold up against the Maoist army's attacks. The situation was unsalvageable. The commander of the Western army, Zhao Lian, was heavily injured and captured. Fighting against the Chu army was different from fighting against the Western Tomb Northern militants. In the end, other than the conflicts between the upper echelons of power, the ordinary Chu army soldiers and Maoist army soldiers, as well as the people of the Chu state, were no different from the people of the Northwest. They also never thought that after the Maoist army and the Chu state broke off relations, they would become mortal enemies. So when so many Chu state citizens fled to the Northwest, the people of the Northwest accepted them without any ill feelings. It was because they were one family to begin with. Just like the people in the Northwest had never thought that the Prince Ding mansion would stay in that small corner of the Northwest. The people of the Chu state never thought that the Prince Ding mansion and the Maoist army would abandon them. Therefore, in this battle, both sides still held back some of their strength. Killing each other was not something that made people happy. Whether it was the Maoist army or the Chu army, they usually would not kill prisoners or heavily injured enemy soldiers. And when the Chu army could not defeat the Maoist army after trying their best, the soldiers at the bottom had no qualms about putting down their weapons and surrendering. Zhao Lian's failure made Mo Jingli very irritable. Facing the approaching Maoist army led by Lu Jingxian and Yi Li, Mo Jingli very decisively abandoned his troops to guard Cold Valley Pass and escaped before Yi Li and the others arrived. This made the Maoist army speechless. Yun Ting could not think straight and would rather die than retreat half a step. And Mo Jingli retreated too quickly. With the natural defense of Cold Valley Pass, if the command was right, it would not be a problem to guard it for at least 2 to 3 months. At that time, the Chu army's reinforcements would arrive. Although Mo Jingli's abandonment of Cold Valley Pass dealt a heavy blow to the Chu army's morale, it also brought a lot of trouble to Yi Li and the others. If Mo Jingli ran back to Jiangnan and did not come out, that would be fine. But with Mo Jingli's temper, he would definitely hide and wait for reinforcements to arrive before coming out to cause trouble. This would imperceptibly prolong the time that the Maoist army and the Chu army fought. As expected, in less than half a month, when the Chu army's reinforcements neared the north, Mo Jingli appeared again. This time, compared to the ambiguous alliance with Shiling to attack the Maoist army, Mo Jingli directly issued a decree as the emperor of the Chu state. He announced to the world that the Prince Ding mansion had betrayed the Chu state and that Mo Xiuyao intended to destroy the Chu state and then ascend the throne. He also listed Mo Xiuyao's 49 crimes to show that the Chu state's attack on the Prince Ding mansion was righteous and in accordance with the will of the heavens. These things naturally did not affect the Maoist army. Yi Li only casually glanced at the decree that was sent to the Maoist army before handing it to Yun Ting. Yun Ting snorted disdainfully after reading it and used it to prop up the foot of the table. If the prince was interested in the throne, he would have ascended the throne long ago. Did he need to wait for Mo Jingli to issue a decree? Also, did Mo Jingli think that the world was blind? The Maoist army had never taken an inch of land from the hands of the Chu state. The Maoist army had already cut ties with the Chu state for a long time. No matter how one looked at it, the Prince Ding mansion had a solid foundation. Speaking of this, Yun Ting couldn't help but sigh at the prince's foresight. It had to be known that the Central Plains were not barbarians. They called themselves the land of etiquette. No matter if it was the court officials or the common people, they all placed great importance on etiquette. If the Prince Ding mansion had directly attacked the Chu state, even if the Maoist army had conquered the land, with the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the Chu state, Prince Ding would be criticized in the history books. Wang Fei, a secret letter from Master Feng San. Just as everyone was mocking Imo Jingli's actions, the voice of a guard came from outside the tent. Yili slightly frowned and said, Feng San. Bring it in. Feng Zhiyao was with Mo Xiuyao. Under normal circumstances, Feng Zhiyao would not write a letter to her alone. Unless something had happened that Feng Zhiyao could not control with his power or power. Yi Li's heart sank slightly. She raised her hand to take the letter that the guard presented. The letter was sealed with wax. On the seal, there was the highest level seal of the Prince Ding mansion. It showed that the contents of the letter were not ordinary. Calming her mind, Yi Li opened the letter and scanned it. The hand holding the letter trembled slightly and the letter fell to the ground. Yi Li's body couldn't help but soften as she fell into the chair. Yun Ting and the others sitting on the side jumped in fright and quickly came forward. Wang Fei. On a white letter, Feng Zhiyao's handwriting was messy and anxious. There were only a few words. The prince is heavily injured, return quickly. Chapter 984. Wang Fei. Everyone looked in shock at Yi Li, not knowing what had happened. It had to be known that even though Princess Ding's age was not older than anyone present, but that calmness of hers was something that even a veteran like Lu Jingxian who had been through hundreds of battles admired. To be able to make Wang Fei pale like this, the matter was probably. Yun Ting went forward to pick up the letter. When he looked down, he almost screamed, Wang, shut up. Yi Li quickly recovered and cut off Yun Ting's words. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her eyes had recovered their calmness and indifference. Yi Li reached out. Yun Ting suppressed his shock and handed the letter to Yi Li with both hands. Yi Li took the letter and read it again. Then she asked, where is the person who delivered the letter? Let him in. A short while later, a young man with red eyes and travel-worn walked in. Wang Fei. Ajin, Yi Li said in a deep voice. Ajin was Mo Xiuyao's most loyal person. At the same time, he was the person who rarely appeared in front of others and was the least likely to attract attention. Feng Zhiyao choosing Ajin to personally deliver the letter caused Yi Li to have some bad thoughts. Focusing, Yi Li asked softly, Ajin, what happened to Prince? Ajin bit his lip and looked anxiously at Yi Li. He said, Prince. Prince is unconscious. Feng San Gongzi wants me to ask Wang Fei to quickly return. Ajin knew that he was not smart, so he was more loyal than other people. Furthermore, His Highness and Princess Consort didn't despise him because he wasn't smart. Instead, they trusted him. This was why Feng San Gongzi had him personally deliver the letter. Otherwise, when the prince was seriously injured, even if it was Feng San Gongzi's orders, he would not leave the prince's side. Yi Li's heart trembled slightly. She nodded and said, I understand. You go and rest first. We'll leave tonight. Ah Jean nodded heavily. Although young Master Feng San had suppressed the news of Prince's coma, young Master Feng San couldn't suppress it for long if the prince didn't appear in front of people. If Princess Consort could hurry back as soon as possible, the situation would be much easier to handle. After sending Jin out, Zhuojing and the others at the side spoke, Wang Fei, now we. Yi Li raised a hand to stop him from asking. Taking a deep breath, she said, Qin Feng, I will write a letter for you to personally go and deliver it to General Liu. Zhuojing, Lin Han, pack up. We will set off immediately. Yes, Wang Fei, Zhuojing and the other two said in unison. Then they quickly left the tent to make their own preparations. Yi Li looked at He Su and Yun Ting who were left behind and said, After I return, the Mahist army's actions against the Chu army will be under General Liu's command. You too, must listen to General Lu's orders. Do you understand? Yunting and Hisu nodded and said respectfully, this general obeys. Seeing Yi Li's slightly absent-minded appearance, Yunting couldn't help but say, Wang Fei, Prince's good fortune fills the heavens. He will definitely turn misfortune into good fortune. Wang Fei, please be assured. Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded, I understand. Mo Xiaoyao's life was very strong. How could he die? Yi Li smiled faintly. But Yunting and Hisu became even more worried. The two exchanged a look and then could only leave helplessly. In a certain camp of the Chu army, Mo Jingli was lying comfortably on a chair covered in thick fur in a grand tent. He was enjoying the dance of the dancers in front of him. He was holding an enchanting woman in his arms, and his usually gloomy face was filled with complacency. A general came in and looked at the singing and dancing in front of him. He frowned almost imperceptibly. Emperor. Mo Jingli raised an eyebrow and asked, what is it? The general lowered his eyes and respectfully presented a secret letter. Mo Jingli opened it and read. He immediately roared with laughter. He sat up and held the woman's slender waist with one hand. He held the letter in his hand with the other. He was in a very good mood. Good, it really is good. It really wasn't a waste of Zhen. Generally, pass down the order. Put down light cards on the roads leading to Fei Hong Pass and stop Yi Li. That's right, don't hurt her, bring her to see Zhen. Zhen wants to see who will have the last laugh. General Li frowned slightly. After a moment of silence, he reported, Emperor, please reconsider. If Princess Ding is preparing to return to Fei Hong Pass, there will be Qi Lin protecting her along the way. It's already not easy to kill her. If you want to capture her alive, I'm afraid. It wasn't that he was looking down on himself, but against the Qi Lin that made the nobles of the various countries tremble in fear, even the right people might not be enough. But the emperor wanted to increase the difficulty. He requested that Princess Ding not be harmed. Mo Jingli's face darkened with displeasure. He coldly said, you can't do it. General Li hesitated for a moment. In the end, he secretly sighed. It was fine. The possibility of killing Ding Wang Fei was so low that it was negligible. If he let Princess Ding escape because he showed mercy, it would be easier for the emperor to blame him. This subordinate understands. Mo Jingli nodded in satisfaction. Seeing that General Li still had a trace of confusion on his face, Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows and smiled. You want to know why Yi Li is suddenly in a hurry to go back? Emperor, please tell me. General Li respectfully said. Princess Ding leaving was naturally a good thing for them. But with Princess Ding suddenly leaving and the emperor's overflowing joy, General Li knew that something must have happened at Fei Hong Pass. Mo Jingli said with a clear smile, for us, it is indeed a good thing. Mo Xiaoyao is going to die, isn't that a good thing? Hearing this, General Li was shocked. The words, is going to die, didn't seem to be used on Prince Ding. How many people in the world cursed Prince Ding to die early? But after so many years, the Prince Ding mansion rose and fell. Prince Ding was still smiling proudly in the world. To General Li, the words, Prince Ding is going to die, were more like a daydream. Although he was thinking wildly in his heart, his face was still very respectful. He didn't even forget to match it with a shocked expression. Seeing his subordinate's shocked expression, Mo Jingli's mood became even more joyful. He couldn't wait to see Yi Li's expression. Or Lei Jinting and Lei Tingfeng, this pair of father and son who burned the bridge after crossing the river. Didn't Mo Xiaoyao also die at his hands? Ahem, Your Majesty, it's best to confirm this matter. After all, Prince Ding is. General Li coughed and reminded Mo Jingli implicitly. That year, Prince Ding's injuries were so severe that the entire world thought he was crippled. But in less than 10 years, Prince Ding led the Mahist army and swept through the world again, causing people to tremble in fear. Seeing Mo Jingli's proud expression, General Li couldn't help but remind him to be more careful. There were some people in the world that were best not to provoke. If you already provoked them, then you had to be even more careful. Unless you saw his corpse with your own eyes, you couldn't let your guard down. Otherwise, the unlucky one would be you. Mo Jingli narrowed his eyes and thought for a moment. It was rare that he actually listened to his subordinate's words. He nodded and said, "You're right. We should investigate this matter to avoid any mistakes. Mo Xiuyao, we don't believe that you're that lucky. You didn't die last time, but you won't die this time." Chapter 985. In the dark night, a few fast horses galloped on the official road, kicking up dust along the way. Yili rode on the back of a horse and kept whipping her whip as she galloped forward. Because she had the memories of 2 lifetimes and was not an impulsive person, Yili had always been calm and unruffled. But this time, she could not help but lose her sense of propriety. She allowed the cold wind to blow against her cheeks and messed up the hair on her temples. Shuijing and the others followed behind Yili and were also galloping without stopping. The sudden accident in the originally smooth battle caught everyone off guard. Suddenly, the horse that Yili was sitting on let out a neigh and reared up. "Princess consort, be careful." Yili jumped up from the horse's back. When she landed on the ground, the galloping horse also fell to the ground. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, a rain of arrows came from both sides of the road. A murderous look flashed across Yili's beautiful eyes. She said in a low voice, "They've all been dealt with." In the darkness, countless men in black rushed out from the shadows, killing the archers on both sides of the road. Yili, on the other hand, had already mounted another horse and galloped forward. Behind Yili, Lin Han and Zhuijing and Jin did not pay attention to the killing in front of them. They followed Yili's back. On the ancient road in the bleak moonlit night, a tall man stood silently by the side of the road. He raised his head and looked at the new moon in the sky. His blue cotton clothes looked even darker in the dark night. It also added a coldness and scruples that he did not usually have. The man held a heavy sword in his hand. It was as if he had just been standing there, but also as if he had been standing there since ancient times. On the road in the distance, the sound of horses galloping could be heard. A woman in black and a young man in green appeared beside the man. The woman in black frowned and said, "Big brother, are we really going to do this?" The man in green disagreed and said, "Big brother, offending the Prince Ding mansion is not a wise thing to do." The middle-aged man glanced sideways at his sister-in-law and said indifferently, "This is my business. You two leave immediately." A trace of impatience flashed across the young man's sinister face, and he said snappily, "Big brother, if something really happens to Yili here, do you think the Prince Ding mansion will let us off? Since that's the case, what's the difference between you and the 3 of us?" The middle-aged man said, "This is my personal matter. Go back, this is an order." "But..." The woman in black frowned. "Unless you don't recognize me as your big brother, leave immediately," the middle-aged man said. The black-clothed woman helplessly stomped her feet and pulled the green-clothed man, disappearing into the night. The 2 of them had just left when the sound of horse hooves, which was still very far away, had already reached them. The leader was a woman in white with a cloak draped over her shoulders. Seeing the middle-aged man waiting by the side of the road, a trace of surprise flashed across the woman's face and she pulled on the reins. Under the night sky, everyone was silent for a while. Yili said indifferently, "I never thought that one of the people who came to make things difficult for me would be the master of the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce." The middle-aged man was one of the 4 great experts in the world, the master of the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce, Ling Taihan. Mu Qingzang had been missing for a long time, and Lei Zhenting was getting older. Ling Taihan and Mo Xiuyao were the 2 people with the highest martial arts in the world. Moreover, Lei Zhenting, who had spent his life studying martial arts, was definitely not as easy to deal with as Mu Qingzang. The moment they saw him, Zhuo Jing and the other 2 immediately stepped forward and shielded Yili behind them. As for their actions, Ling Taihan didn't pay any attention to them. He just looked at Yili faintly. A trace of regret flashed across his resolute and calm face. I also didn't expect this day to come. Whether it was his appreciation for Mo Xiuyao, his friendship with Su Qingchen, or his pure admiration for this woman, Ling Taihan had never thought that one day he would have to make a move against her. Unfortunately, Zhuo Jing stood in front of Yili and said in a low voice, "Pavilion Master Ling, you are an expert of a generation. Are you not afraid that the world will laugh at you if word of this gets out?" Ling Taihan looked at Zhuo Jing with a half-smile and said indifferently, "The subordinates of the Prince Ding mansion are indeed all loyal and righteous. Don't tell me you don't know what this lord does." The Yanwang Chamber of Commerce was an organization of assassins. Who would talk about fairness with an assassin? Asking an assassin to be honorable? When Ling Taihan was young, his martial arts had yet to be accomplished. As an ordinary assassin at the lowest level, he had used many despicable methods to assassinate his enemies. As the pavilion master of the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce, Ling Taihan had never placed much importance on his reputation. Zhuo Jing was speechless. He felt that it was ridiculous to talk about morality and reputation with someone who used to be an assassin. "I remember that Pavilion Master Ling and Genom of Gojoseon have a grudge against each other," Yili said indifferently. Mo Jingli alone wouldn't be able to move Ling Taihan, so it could only be Lei Zhenting. Ling Taihan didn't deny it. He nodded and said, "That's right. But even so, I'm still from West Hill." Yili looked down and frowned. Speaking of which, not many people know about Pavilion Master Ling's background. Pavilion Master Ling is also a member of the Emperor of Shiling's family. Ling Taihan looked at Yili with some surprise. After a while, he smiled and said, "Princess Ding is indeed extraordinary." Yili shook her head helplessly. "If Pavilion Master Ling didn't appear here, I wouldn't have made such a guess." Although there were many people who guessed Ling Taihan's background, Ling Taihan usually didn't have any flaws or loopholes. He hadn't interacted with the Emperor of Shiling for so many years, so it was naturally difficult for people to guess his background. But when Yili eliminated all the possibilities that could make Ling Taihan help Lei Zhenting, there was only one left. The bad relationship between Ling Taihan and Lei Zhenting wasn't just an act. To make Ling Taihan put aside the prejudice of so many years to help Lei Zhenting, Ling Taihan could only be a member of the Emperor of Shiling's family. The long ancient road seemed cold and lonely under the dim moonlight. After a while, Ling Taihan said, "My mother used to be the imperial concubine of the late emperor." Yili raised her eyebrows. There were always schemes and conflicts in the palace. Ling Taihan was the prince of the late emperor of Shiling, but he only said that he had a grudge against Ling Taihan and not the emperor of Shiling's family. It was likely that the early death of Ling Taihan's mother and her wandering in the Jianghu had something to do with Lei Zhenting, or Lei Zhenting's mother's family. Yili vaguely remembered that there was an extremely favored imperial concubine of the late emperor of Shiling. Later, she seemed to have been killed by the late emperor of Shiling. But it was really too long ago, so naturally, no one paid attention to it. Even Yili herself only glanced at Lei Zhenting's file by chance. She didn't even remember the name of that imperial concubine. Yili sighed softly. She also understood that the situation before her was inevitable. She nodded and said, "Pavilion Master Ling, please make your move." Ling Taihan raised his eyebrows. You're not afraid. If Yili said that she was confident that she could defeat Ling Taihan, it was definitely a joke. If Ling Taihan went all out to kill, not to mention Yili, even if everyone on the battlefield was tied up, they still wouldn't be enough to kill Ling Taihan. Chapter 986. Yili smiled helplessly and said, "So what if I'm afraid?" If she was afraid that Ling Taihan would let her go, she didn't mind showing how scared she was. Ling Taihan looked down at the iron sword in his hand and said, "If Princess is willing, you can visit the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce as a guest. After half a month, I will personally send Princess back." Ling Taihan made it very obvious that he didn't want to make things difficult for Yili. He just wanted to stop her from rushing back. As for whether Yili was alive or dead, it didn't make any difference to Ling Taihan. Ling Taihan didn't want to fight with her because of his friendship with Su Qingqin and his admiration for Yili. Unfortunately, although Ling Taihan thought so, Yili didn't appreciate his kindness. She smiled faintly and said, "Pavilion Master Ling, please." As Yili spoke, Zhuojing, Lin Han, and Jin quietly moved and surrounded Ling Taihan. However, on the whole, they all seemed to be blocking Yili from entering the room. Seeing their actions, Ling Taihan's eyes flashed with admiration. He nodded and said, "In that case, I'll offend you." Ling Taihan slowly pulled out the iron sword in his hand. His movements were slow as if he was hesitating whether to use the sword or not. Just as he pulled out the sword, Zhuojing, Lin Han, and Jin rushed over from 3 directions at the same time. This was supposed to happen in the blink of an eye, but the moment they moved, they saw a cold light cut through the night sky. Ling Taihan's long sword swept toward Zhuojing and the others with a sharp sword aura. With Ling Taihan's skills, if Zhuojing and the others met him head-on, they would be injured or killed. So when they saw the cold light, the 3 of them changed their direction at the same time and brushed past the sword aura. A large piece of Lin Han's clothes was cut off. Zhuojing and the other 2 stared at the man in front of them solemnly. At that moment, they finally understood the gap between them and a real supermaster. Facing Ling Taihan's overwhelming pressure, the 3 of them only felt a faint burning pain in their hearts. If it weren't for the fact that the 3 of them were people with strong willpower, they would have already fallen to the ground. Zhuojing took a deep breath. Suddenly, he straightened his sword and charged toward Ling Taihan again. Figures danced in front of him, and sword chi filled the air. However, Zhuojing's all-out attack was unable to disrupt Ling Taihan's state of mind. As they fought, Ling Taihan even had the time to speak. "That's right. In the world of martial arts, only speed is invincible. But, you're not fast enough." Ling Taihan's speed wasn't fast, but no matter how fast Zhuojing was, Ling Taihan's sword was always able to easily block at the most appropriate place. This kind of attack didn't just exhaust the opponent's physical strength and energy, it also wore down the opponent's willpower. Lin Han and Jin looked at each other. Lin Han raised the sword in his hand and charged forward. Jin waved the long whip in her hand. With a whoosh, it shot toward Ling Taihan like a poisonous snake. Yili, who was standing at the side, sighed slightly. She drew the short blade in her sleeve and charged forward as well. In terms of close combat, there weren't many people in the world who were Yili's match. But Ling Taihan was obviously one of them. Princess's skills. "It's a pity that your internal energy is too weak," Ling Taihan praised sincerely. As a woman, Yili's skills weren't bad. She had only been practicing internal energy for 10 years, but she was already comparable to Ling Luiyue. It was clear that Yili's talent wasn't ordinary. It was a pity that she had missed the best age to practice internal energy. Compared to a peerless master like Ling Taihan, she really wasn't worth mentioning. Yi Li's movements were even faster than Zhuo Jing and Lin Han's. Every move she made was aimed at a vital point. However, in Ling Taihan's eyes, such a dangerous move was still not enough. It was no wonder that she was the only peerless master in the world who could compete with Prince Ding. Although it was 4 against 1, Zhuo Jing and the others became more and more depressed. Just like how they couldn't win against Prince Ding, they also couldn't win against Ling Taihan, who was evenly matched with Prince Ding. "Princess, leave quickly," Zhuo Jing said in a low voice. Yi Li smiled bitterly, but her hands didn't stop moving. How could she leave now? Ling Taihan wasn't using his full strength. If she left, Zhuo Jing would die in a few moments at Ling Taihan's hands. More importantly, she didn't have the confidence that she could escape Ling Taihan's pursuit alone. "Princess Ding, I have offended you." Ling Taihan's cold voice carried a trace of regret. The sword in his hand moved like the wind, easily pushing Zhuo Jing and Lin Han aside. His sword went straight for Yi Li. "Princess!" Zhuo Jing and the other two exclaimed in unison. At the same time, Zhuo Jing whistled softly and rushed forward with Lin Han. The long swords in their hands fiercely chopped down. This strike used up all of their strength, and they actually managed to block Ling Taihan's strike. Jin took the opportunity to pull Yi Li behind her with her long whip. "Princess, leave quickly," Jin said, staring at Ling Taihan with an unfriendly expression. "Interesting." Ling Taihan raised his eyebrows as he looked at Zhuo Jing and Lin Han, who had fallen to the ground. They weren't injured. They just used up all their strength to block Ling Taihan's sword. But if these two people did not die this time, no matter if it was their state of mind or martial arts, they would have a huge improvement. The people from Ding Palace are indeed extraordinary. But, is there anyone who can block the next sword? Yi Li's expression was heavy. She had never felt so powerless in all these years. Qi Lin hadn't arrived yet. He must have been entangled by the people sent by the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce and Enchanting. Moreover, as the saying goes, a strong person can defeat 10 skilled people. In the face of absolute strength, no matter how many strategies and schemes there were, they were all empty words. Looking at the woman in white who was as calm as water, Ling Taihan sighed softly and waved the sword in his hand. Jin swung her whip. The whip, which was specially made by a skilled craftsman, was easily cut by the sword. The sword swept toward Yi Li without stopping. Zhuo Jing and the others widened their eyes in despair. Whoosh! In the dark forest, a strong force shot out and hit Ling Taihan's sword. The sword that was stabbing toward Yi Li paused. Ling Taihan's expression changed slightly. His gaze shot toward the forest on the ancient road. Who is it? Chapter 987. In the woods, a man dressed in black strolled out. Under the dim moonlight, his determined face could be seen clearly. The middle-aged man with some wrinkles had a deep, chiseled face, as if carved by a knife. The hair on his temples was already gray, and he looked indifferently at the people under the moonlight. "Mu Qingcang," Ling Taihan said in a low voice. "Pavilion Master Ling, long time no see." Mu Qingcang nodded faintly. The person who came was the former number 1 master of Dechu State, Mu Qingcang, who had suddenly disappeared. Mu Qingcang looked at Yi Li, who was standing to the side, and said, "Princess Consort, you can take them and leave first." Yi Li walked over to help Zhuo Jing and Lin Han up. She nodded and said, "Thank you for your trouble, Mr. Mu." Ling Taihan silently watched Yi Li leave with her people. He didn't chase after them. He knew very well that if he didn't deal with Mu Qingcang first, he wouldn't be able to touch Yi Li tonight. Although he was confident that he could defeat Mu Qingcang, one of the former 4 masters in the world wasn't someone that could be easily dealt with. Moreover, he could feel that Mu Qingsong seemed to be a little different from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, he had a chance to fight with Mu Qingsong. At that time, he clearly felt that Mu Qingsong was regressing. So, he never took Mu Qingsong seriously again. It was inevitable that one's strength would decline as they got older, but at that time, Mu Qingsong was clearly still in his prime. But when they met this time, he found that Mu Qingsong wasn't as bad as he had expected. He even made some progress. Moreover, Ling Taihan also had some things that he didn't understand. Frowning, Ling Taihan said, "I didn't know that Mu Qingsong would actually pledge allegiance to the Prince Ding mansion. Outsiders might not know, but how could Ling Taihan, who controlled the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce, not know Mu Qingsong's true identity?" Mu Yang and Mu Jingmin had just fallen into the hands of the Prince Ding mansion, but Mu Qingsong came to save Princess Ding. This was really out of Ling Taihan's expectations. "I'm not from the Prince Ding mansion," Mu Qingsong said coldly. Ling Taihan raised his eyebrows. "Then Brother Mu, why are you doing this?" Mu Qingsong said, "It's just a deal with the Prince Ding mansion. I promised to protect Princess Ding at the Prince Ding mansion for 3 days. After 3 days, you can kill me or torture me as you wish." Ling Taihan sighed helplessly and said, "Although I don't want to fight with Brother Mu now, it seems that I have no choice but to do so." 3 days later, Yili had already returned to the Mahist army's camp. At that time, with the protection of hundreds of thousands of Mahist army and thousands of Qilin, it would be difficult to even get close to Yili, let alone kill Yili after you. Mu Qingsong nodded indifferently. Soon, 2 figures fiercely fought on the ancient road. Under the moonlight, the 2 figures met at times, and sword chiefs shot out in all directions. The momentum of a fight between real experts was completely different from the fight with Yili and the others just now. In the dark, Ling Luiyue and Mu Qingsong watched Yili and the others riding away. Ling Luiyue frowned and said, "Should we help Big Brother stop them?" Although they didn't agree with touching Princess Ding, since Big Brother insisted on doing it, they could only support him as his younger siblings. Sickly Scholar shook his head and said, "No, let them go. The Prince Ding mansion isn't that easy to mess with, and Big Brother also went easy on them just now. With Ling Taihan's martial arts, if he really wanted to kill Yili, he could just hide in the dark and directly attack. Even if Mo Xiuya personally came, he wouldn't be able to stop him if he wasn't prepared beforehand. They were assassins, so why would they need to stand on the side of the road and talk nonsense for so long?" Ling Luiyue frowned and thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "That's right, Big Brother promised to kill Yili on the road. If Yili herself escapes and returns to the Mahist army, then it's not our fault. Moreover, the other side also had the help of one of the world's top 4 experts. Even if Big Brother failed, no one could say anything. As assassins, whether it was the indifferent Ling Luiyue or the ruthless Sickly Scholar, they were all calm and rational people. With the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce's Jianghu influence, it wasn't a good thing for them to go up against the Prince Ding mansion, whose influence spanned over half of the original Xiling and Dechu state. Whether Mo Xiuya was seriously injured or not, as long as Mo Xiuya wasn't dead, the Mahist army and the Prince Ding mansion were still extremely terrifying existences. It should be known that when Mo Xiuya's legs were crippled and he was poisoned, he still managed to protect the Prince Ding mansion, which was on the verge of collapse. Not to mention that the Prince Ding mansion's influence was at its peak. If Enchanting hadn't sent people to find Big Brother this time, they wouldn't even have known that Big Brother, who had no parents since childhood, was the prince of the Emperor of Xiling. However, for so many years, the Emperor of Xiling had nothing to do with them. Big Brother had never received any benefits from the Emperor of Xiling. They had even been wantonly suppressed by Enchanting. Why should Big Brother go up against the Prince Ding mansion for the Emperor of Xiling? The battle between Ling Taihan and Mu Qingsong lasted until the next morning. The morning sun shone on the side of the ancient road. Ling Taihan stood on the side of the road with the iron sword in his hand, looking down at Mu Qingsong not far away. Blood quietly slid down his arm from his sleeves and fell into the dust at his feet. "Did Chu State's #1 expert, you really live up to your reputation," Ling Taihan said lightly. Not far in front of him, Mu Qingsong half knelt on the ground with a pale face. His right shoulder was almost pierced through, and his abdomen was already dyed red with blood. This time, the two of them weren't the same as the previous spars between Ling Taihan and Mo Xiuyao. This was a true battle of life and death. In the past few years, Mu Qingsong didn't pay attention to worldly affairs and lived in seclusion, concentrating on martial arts. After throwing away the shackles that had been placed on him, Mu Qingsong gradually recovered and even improved his martial arts. Although he was slightly inferior to Ling Taihan, when he fought with his life on the line, Ling Taihan was actually stopped here for an entire night. Mu Qingsong casually wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and smiled bitterly. Pavilion Master Ling is too kind. This one admits defeat. Ling Taihan shook his head and didn't say anything. Ling Luyue and Sickly Scholar appeared in front of him. When they saw the dark red blood on the ground beside Ling Taihan, they stared unkindly at the heavily injured Mu Qingsong kneeling on the ground. "Big brother," Mu Qingsong reached out to stop Sickly Scholar, who wanted to kill Mu Qingsong. "The victor has been decided. There's no need to cause any more trouble." Sickly Scholar nodded and asked, "Big brother, are we still chasing?" Ling Taihan smiled at his two younger siblings who had worried expressions. He raised his sword-wielding hand and said, "I have internal injuries. Let's go back." Ling Luyue and Sickly Scholar's eyes flashed with surprise. Big brother really didn't plan on killing Princess Ding. "Yes, big brother. Let's go back." Ling Luyue stepped forward to support Ling Taihan. Ling Taihan waved his hand and said, "No need. Brother Mu, do you need me to send someone to send you back?" "Thank you, Pavilion Master Ling. The Prince Ding mansion will take care of Mr. Mu." At some point, Mo Hua appeared on the side of the ancient road and looked at the three people in front of him with a cold expression. Seeing Mo Hua, Ling Taihan frowned. The assassins of the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce who were sent to stop Qi Lin and the Mahist Army's shadow guard were probably finished. Ling Taihan didn't know Mo Hua, but he could see that Mo Hua's martial arts were far superior to Zhuo Jing and Lin Han. Such a person didn't have the slightest reputation in the imperial court or in Jianghu. It could be seen that the Prince Ding mansion was really full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Chapter 988. Forget it, Yanwang Chamber. It's been too long, and he's a little tired of it. Nodding, Ling Taihan said, "Goodbye. If Prince Ding wants revenge, I'll be waiting for you at any time." Ling Luyue wanted to say something, but Ling Taihan glanced at her. She had no choice but to shut her mouth and leave with Ling Taihan. Only Mo Hua and Mu Qingsong were left on the side of the road. Mo Hua said in a deep voice, "Thank you for your help, Mr. Mu. How are your injuries?" Mu Qingsong stood up, but his body was a little shaky. Although he fought with Ling Taihan for a few hours, his injuries were far more than Ling Taihan's. Ling Taihan said that he suffered internal injuries, but Mu Qingsong knew that Ling Taihan only suffered some superficial injuries. "Fortunately, I hope the Prince Ding mansion can keep their promise." Mu Qingsong stared at Mo Hua. Mo Hua nodded, raised his hand and clapped lightly. Two men in black walked over with an old man. Rather than saying that they were carrying him, it was better to say that they were carrying him. The old man's hair was as white as snow, and his face looked like an old man who was already over 70 years old. However, those who knew him knew that he was 2 years away from 60. Even half a month ago, he looked like a middle-aged man in his 40s. What did you do to him? Mu Qingsong's eyes turned cold as he asked sternly. Mo Hua said indifferently, we didn't do anything. He was already like this when we brought him back. Ever since he saw Mu Yang's corpse, Marquis Mu Yang seemed to have aged 20 to 30 years overnight. Moreover, his mind was a little unclear. He was muddle-headed, and no matter how others treated him, he didn't respond. He would occasionally wake up, and no matter who he grabbed, he would call Yang, Even Mo Xiuyao, who originally wanted to see him, had no interest in him. If not for this, Mu Qingsong probably wouldn't have been able to see him. Mu Qingsong supported his somewhat wobbly body and walked forward to support Marquis Mu Yang. He called out softly, Fa. Father. As if he heard the word father, Marquis Mu Yang's dazed eyes turned and stared fixedly at Mu Qingsong. After a while, he said, Yang. Yang, A trace of sadness flashed through Mu Qingsong's eyes. He supported Marquis Mu Yang from the two black-clothed shadow guards and said, Father, let's go home. Marquis Mu Yang had no objections and allowed Mu Qingsong to help him walk away. Behind him, Mo Hua said in a deep voice, in exchange for saving the princess consort, Marquis Mu Yang will be at your disposal. But, if he does something he shouldn't do again, Mr. Mu better remember Prince's words. Mu Qingsong paused and said in a low voice, I know. You won't see him or me again in the future. Looking at Mu Qingsong and Marquis Mu Yang's departing figures, the shadow guard beside Mo Hua asked in a low voice, Commander, are we letting them go just like that? Mo Hua nodded and said in a low voice, Mu Qingsong saved the princess consort. When it came to matters related to the princess consort, the prince always kept his word. Moreover, the prince didn't kill Mu Qingsong for so many years. Naturally, he wouldn't be interested in killing him now. Let's go back. We still have things to do in the army. Soon, the three black-clothed men disappeared from the side of the ancient road. On the official road, in an inconspicuous roadside courier station, Lei Tingfeng was sitting leisurely and drinking tea. Although he had been tricked by Mo Xiuyao previously and had hurried back to Yuming Pass, the Xinghe Empire and the Western Xinghe Empire didn't have to worry about. However, the subsequent developments did not cause any harm to Xiling and the Lord of Jinnan's residence. On the contrary, Mo Jingli had surprised everyone with a single brilliant feat. He had made the Xiling army, who had been in a passive position on the battlefield, much more comfortable. Therefore, Lei Tingfeng's mood had been very good these few days. Seeing the three people strolling over not far away, the smile on Lei Tingfeng's face became even wider. He even got up to greet them personally. Tingfeng greets the royal uncle. Ling Taihan looked at the man in front of him indifferently. The Jianghu is uncivilized. I don't dare to accept the crown prince's greeting. Lei Tingfeng smiled and said, how can that be? The royal uncle is the son of the royal grandfather, and also a blood relative of the Emperor of Xiling. It's natural for Tingfeng to greet you. Ling Taihan frowned and looked at him for a moment. Suddenly, he revealed a cold smile. Lei Tingfeng, didn't your father tell you to stay away from me? Lei Tingfeng was shocked. His father had indeed warned him before. It was just that he had some urgent matters to take care of, so he came personally. He didn't expect that he would lose his sense of propriety. Although there were many thoughts in his mind, Lei Tingfeng's face was calm. He said respectfully, nephew has been rude. Please forgive me, Pavilion Master Ling. Ling Taihan snorted and walked forward. Lei Tingfeng glanced at Ling Taihan's blood-stained sleeves and frowned slightly. He hurriedly followed and said, Pavilion Master Ling, I wonder if Princess Ding has left. Ling Taihan said calmly. What? Lei Tingfeng couldn't help but cry out. He really didn't expect that even the Yanwang Chamber's pavilion master couldn't kill Yi Li. His father had clearly said that Ling Taihan's martial arts were very likely above his. How could he not be able to kill Yi Li, whose martial arts weren't first class? Ling Taihan turned around and glanced at the shocked man behind him. Lei Tingfeng only felt his scalp go numb, but he still had to resist Ling Taihan's pressure and said, "Pavilion Master Ling, you clearly promised my father. I said I'll do my best." Ling Taihan interrupted him and said, "I've already done my best." But the martial arts of Yi Li and the people around her. Lei Tingfeng said in disbelief. Sickly Scholar glanced at Lei Tingfeng and said, "Can't you see that Big Brother is already injured? If you think that anyone can catch up to Yi Li and kill her after fighting with Mu Qingsong, why are you still looking for Big Brother?" Mu Qingsong. Lei Tingfeng's heart sank. Even if they were scheming, they didn't expect that there would be another Mu Qingsong. The former #1 expert of Dechu State, after being silent for nearly 10 years, the first thing he did when he reappeared was to ruin the Prince Ding Mansion's important matter. But seeing the three people leisurely stroll, even Lei Tingfeng felt uncomfortable in his heart no matter how good his temper was. With Ling Taihan like this, who would believe that he didn't go easy? Perhaps because Lei Tingfeng's expression was too obvious, Ling Taihan frowned and looked at Lei Tingfeng and said, "Lei Tingfeng, do you think that because I'm injured, I won't dare to kill you?" Lei Tingfeng's expression changed slightly. He lowered his eyes and said, "This little nephew doesn't dare. Since it's like this little nephew will take his leave." Ling Taihan didn't comment and only said, "Go back and tell Lei Jinting that I've repaid the favor I owe him. In the future, it's time to resolve the grudge between this lord and him." Lei Tingfeng said quietly, "This little nephew will definitely pass the message to father. Goodbye." Lei Tingfeng said quietly, "This little nephew will definitely pass the message to father. Goodbye." Although he didn't know what kind of grudge there was between father and Ling Taihan, Lei Tingfeng knew that the reason why Ling Taihan hadn't really caused trouble for Jinan Palace was because Ling Taihan owed father a great favor back then. Otherwise, as long as Ling Taihan chose to support the Emperor of Xiling, coupled with the power of the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce, he could give Jinan Palace a headache.